brighter, but we will see these bands of showers zipping through. Quite the same intensity as the downpours we've seen through the night, but nevertheless still one or two lively ones. But they fade away through this evening, and then much of the southern half of the UK will have a dry night. We'll continue to see outbreaks of rain across parts of Scotland, but losing their intensity, so not as heavy. Temperature-wise, well, still quite warm, but not quite as sticky as the last couple of nights. On to Sunday, and for a good part of the country, it's a dry, fine start. Some good spells of sunshine for Wales, southern England. Cloud and rain clearing away from Scotland. Come in the afternoon, some showers likely, especially over central and eastern parts of England. Again, one or two heavy ones, but not the same intensity to the thunderstorms we've seen of late. And it's turning fresher, less humid as well, but still getting into the mid-20s in the sunny spells in the east.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
French authorities first seized the Lady T, and that's an Eastbourne-based fishing vessel. And next, they fined its skipper, Philip Edwards, €30,000 to release his boat. Now, the Lady T, operating legally under UK jurisdiction, was intercepted by a French patrol ship near the Somme Bay. Now, the incident has sparked massive outrage among British fishermen and is renewing calls for the government to stand firm against French overreach in national waters. Well, I'm delighted to say I'm now joining with Charlotte Edwards, who's the husband. Philip is the skipper of the Lady T and is out fishing right now. Charlotte, welcome to the show. I've got to say, here at GB News, we are hugely supportive and appreciative of British fishermen and fisherwomen. Do a fantastic job. So if you're nervous about the interview, please don't be. I want to ask you how on earth this happened. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, for example, that the Lady T didn't have the correct paperwork, it was fishing illegally, and the French decided to pounce. What's the reality?
The paperwork just slipped through. It was an admin error. The other two boats had the permits, and unfortunately, his didn't at the time. He wasn't in as far in as they said he was. He was about 800 metres in their water. He wasn't near the 12-mile.
He was intercepted by the Pluvier. That's a French Navy ship. No, by the way, the sort of French Navy ships that just seem to give an escort to illegal dinghies coming into British waters, suddenly pouncing into action. The only boat they've managed to stop seems to be the Lady T.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning on this beautiful Saturday and welcome to Trooping the Colour. I'm Miriam Cates, I'm here alongside Charlie Peters, and over the next few hours get ready for an impressive display of pomp and pageantry as we celebrate the official birthday of His Majesty the King.
All morning we'll be live across the capital at Buckingham Palace, on the Mall and at Horse Guards Parade as thousands of soldiers and musicians march in front of the monarch.
You won't want to miss a moment of this incredible celebration, showcasing the best of Britain.
And we'll be joined by brilliant guests here in the studio and overlooking the palace.
And I'm Cameron Walker, bringing you a front row seat of the parade, the flypast, and of course that all-important balcony appearance over the next few hours. This is Trooping the Colour on GB News.
Well, what a beautiful day it is. Thank goodness the weather seems to be holding. Great to see Cameron out there on the Mall, and I think people have been waiting there for hours and hours already.
Yeah, that's right, Miriam. It seems to be a momentous occasion already for so many people. Some have travelled thousands of miles to be here to witness this great state occasion. I think we can bring us now live to Cameron Walker in Buckingham Palace, who's been there all morning for us, bright and early, as the first onlookers arrived. Cameron, what's the atmosphere like?
Ecstatic, Charlie. I mean, I did not get here as early as some of the dedicated royal fans, which were here. The first person was here at 3 o'clock this morning, a lady called Anne from Wales. She got absolutely drenched through. She's got a cardboard cutout of the King, of the Princess of Wales. Of course, you may be able to hear the Household Division band in the background. In fact, you can just see some of them on your screen now, marching down the Mall towards Horse Guards Parade as those first foot soldiers enter Horse Guards. You can see the crowd, some of which, as I said, have been queuing for hours and hours and hours. This morning, weather was appalling. We're British, of course. We've got to talk about the weather a little bit, don't we? But the sun is now shining, and hopefully it is set to shine for the entirety of the King's birthday parade. And Charlie and Miriam, who would have thought? I bet Oliver Cromwell didn't think, when he ordered the execution of King Charles I in 1649, that a year later, those same soldiers which he rallied to try and quell a Scottish rebellion would not only restore King Charles II to the throne, but 375 years later would be leading the nation in celebrating King Charles III's official birthday. And that is exactly what we are seeing here today with the Coldstream Guards, number 7 Coldstream Guards to be precise, of course celebrating their 375th anniversary this year, the oldest continuously serving regiment in the British Army. So we're going to have lots of pomp and pageantry. They were presented with their new colours just yesterday, actually, by the King at Windsor Castle. Trooping the colour, a tradition, well, dating back kind of from the Middle Ages, where before modern technology was introduced for modern communications, flags were used as a rallying point on the battlefield, so soldiers who became disorientated on the battlefield could see where their superior officers were and could run back towards them. Now, of course, it's purely for ceremonial reasons, but it's the King's official birthday today, not his actual birthday. So his actual birthday is in November, but dating back to George II, whose birthday coincidentally was also in November in the 1700s, he was really annoyed that the weather always used to be pretty poor in November, and he wanted a summer celebration for his birthday. And that is why the tradition of the Sovereign of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has a second birthday in the summer, because the weather, in theory, should be much better. Now, granted, that's not always the case. We live in Britain, don't we? So it does rain quite a lot here. But today it looks like King Charles is going to be very lucky indeed with this weather. Almost too hot. But of course, the crowds are ecstatic. We're seeing some of the foot soldiers from the Household Division marching down the Mall, and the bands ready for Trooping the Colour, kicking off a little bit later on this morning. And the crowds are building still. Charlie and Miriam, back to you.
Thank you, Cameron. And isn't that so British, that the date of something so important was determined by a dislike of the weather? I think that's rather wonderful. Well, we've got plenty more to come. But before we move on, Sam Francis has all your latest news headlines.
Very good morning to you from the newsroom just after 10 o'clock. The top story this hour. Explosions have rocked Tel Aviv, Jerusalem and Tehran overnight as Iran and Israel have traded their most intense fire yet. Well, Iran launched waves of ballistic missiles at Israel in retaliation for Friday's strikes, which hit nuclear sites and killed 6 scientists and senior commanders. At least 2 people in Israel are confirmed dead. Dozens more are injured. Iran claims 78 were killed in the Israeli attacks. The overwhelming majority, they say, civilians. Now, Iran's state media says if the US, UK or France intervene, their bases and warships will also be targeted. Police have used water cannons to push rioters back in Portadown as violent unrest continues across Northern Ireland. Officers were attacked with bricks, fireworks and petrol bombs on Friday night, the 5th consecutive night of disorder. At least 63 officers have been injured so far. It follows a protest earlier this week in Ballymena over an alleged sexual assault, which has since spread to towns across the country. Police say some of the violence is now being coordinated, possibly involving loyalist paramilitary groups. 17 people have been arrested so far, 13 of them charged, and police say more are being identified night and day. Sir Keir Starmer is set to fly to Ottawa today for talks with the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney ahead of this weekend's G7 summit. The two leaders will meet this evening to discuss reviving UK-Canada trade negotiations and deepening security ties, all as Israel's strikes on Iran have raised global tensions. It's their first face-to-face since Carney became Prime Minister in March. Talks are also expected to aim to reset relations after past rows over beef and cheese exports derailed trade talks under the last UK government. On Sunday, Starmer and Carney head to Alberta to join fellow G7 leaders, including Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, for 3 days of global talks in the Canadian Rockies. And the King has ordered changes to this year's Trooping the Colour as a mark of respect for those killed in the Air India crash. A minute's silence will be held during the parade after the King inspects the guards. Senior royals riding in the ceremony will wear black armbands in tribute to the 241 lives lost in Thursday's disaster in Ahmedabad. King Charles and Queen Camilla said they were desperately shocked by the tragedy and praised the emergency services for their response. Union flags are flying at half-mast on all royal residences and government buildings. And thunderstorms lit up the skies across the UK overnight, with the Met Office recording over 30,000 lightning strikes up to 6 o'clock this morning. It came after the hottest day of the year so far, with temperatures hitting just over 29 degrees in Suffolk. An amber alert, though, was issued across the southeast as torrential rain caused flooding in Kent, and lightning is thought to have sparked a fire at a home in St Leonard's. 5 flood warnings and dozens of alerts remain in place, with rail services between Exeter and Oakhampton suspended after a landslip. Temperatures have now dropped, but more heavy showers and storms are forecast through today. Those are the latest headlines for now. Do stay with us for plenty more and, of course, all the action for Trooping the Colour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sam, and welcome back to our special coverage of Trooping the Colour with me, Miriam Cates, and Charlie Peters here on GB News. And we'll be joining Cameron Walker and Pandora Forsyth down at Buckingham Palace very shortly.
Well, with us throughout the morning to give us the expert track on all the elements of the parade is our excellent panel. We've got the constitutional expert and former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and the former Royal Butler Grant Harold. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Nice to be here.
Brilliant.
Yes.
And this obviously is a momentous occasion in the royal calendar. Grant, what are your memories of Trooping the Colour?
Well, it's quite a busy day, obviously, because it's an early start, also, obviously, for everyone taking part, but also for the family as well, because obviously they've got to let everyone else get ready for the day.
And Michael, we're going to see some absolutely spectacular pictures. What should we be looking out for in terms of the uniforms, the horses? What are the...
Well, Miriam, there's so much to see. This is one of the reasons, of course, why it really is a signal event of the royal year. Millions of people around the world watch it. It's not just here in the UK. It's such a popular event that tens of thousands of people travel to London to watch it in person every year. We're going to see 1,000 soldiers on parade, both street lining and, of course, in horse guards. There are 200 horses, including some very special and very tall drum horses, I hope to introduce you to later. They actually have... Did you know, Miriam, that these horses have a rank? They have a military rank.
Did not know that.
The drum
they
horses,
salute at each other.
they're quite senior, you know. They're senior than a lot of the soldiers on parade. So they're major in rank, Juno and Apollo, and they're going to be carrying some very heavy kettle drums. We'll point them out later. But it's a very special day, but most importantly for the soldiers, because what they're going to have is an opportunity to parade and troop their colour, which is very significant. It has a great symbol. It's a symbol of honour, of duty and of service, and of those who lost their lives in the service of King or Queen and country over the course of, well, in the case of the Coldstream Guards, 375 years.
I know also that the Shetland pony, the mascot for the parachute regiment, is a lance corporal, not quite a major, obviously, but you're brand new into the paras. You're a junior to a pony, which must be a slightly dispiriting experience.
Keeps you in your place.
Yes, it very much does, yeah. Brace up for the pony. And Grant, obviously, I mean, you're saying this is a very busy occasion for the whole palace, of course, but a moment of particular pride for those soldiers. It's their turn to troop the colour.
It is, and it is, as Michael said, you know, it's a big occasion. It's a huge thing for them, and, you know, obviously they take tons each year. And the King, this is one of the highlights of the year for the King, because I remember very much this is something that he always looks forward to. It's something he enjoys, and obviously his late mother was the same. It was a highlight of the year for them.
And do you think the royal family ever get nervous? They are on show in front of millions of people, particularly, I think particularly Princess Anne today, who will be riding a horse. Horses don't always do exactly what they're told.
No.
There have been incidences in the past.
No.
Do they feel those nerves, or is this just such part of their life now?
Do you remember in 2023, actually, the King's horse was acting a little bit nervous? You know, it wasn't exactly that comfortable. So, of course, things happen, but no, they don't get nervous. That's the extraordinary. They've been doing this for so long. It's not as if, you know, they've only had a couple of months or a couple of years training. They've done it literally the whole lives. Or the King's been involved since he was 3 years old. The first time he attended Trooping the Colour with his grandmother and his aunt.
And, Michael, this will be quite a different Trooping the Colour to last year, of course, when there was that particular level of interest in the return of Catherine, the Princess of Wales. What can we expect from that royal appearance today?
Well, I think this is a very important event for all of the royal family, as we've been hearing. But what it really is, first and foremost, is an opportunity for all of the royals to show their support to their guards, to the royal guards, which is what they are, and to their armed forces. The bond is historic and it's very close. And what we don't hear very often on the media is what goes on behind the scenes. If there's a tragedy in one of the regiments, it's not unusual for a member of the royal family to write a letter to the family of those who've been killed or injured. There is a bond, there is a connection, there's an historic affiliation, and this is a very important opportunity for that to be visited.
Thank you, Michael. Well, let's join GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who is at Buckingham Palace for us this morning, alongside the Daily Express royal reporter and broadcaster Pandora Forsyth. Cameron, good to see you. How are things progressing?
Well, lots of noise, Miriam, from the massed bands who are marching down the Mall towards Horse Guards Parade ahead of the King's birthday parade in the last few moments, and we think you saw that on your screen as well. Members of the royal family are starting to arrive at Buckingham Palace, and as you said, I'm delighted to be joined by Pandora Forsyth, the broadcaster and royal reporter for the Daily Express. Good morning to you, Pandora.
Good morning, Cameron.
I mean, what an atmosphere so far. I mean, we've been here, what, a couple of hours already so far. The crowds are building.
Yeah.
We've got the military bands. What's your take?
I mean, I spoke to some of the crowd earlier. We've got people from Australia, we've got people from France, obviously people from the UK. They have been out since about 3 a.m. this morning. Some of the crowd has just been let through to get a glimpse of the balcony later, which of course we will see. That's what everybody wants, that big balcony moment. But it's an absolute joy to be here, and we have lucked out with the weather because, as you said earlier, awful weather this morning, and now absolutely delightful, just in time for the King's birthday celebrations.
Which of course is why it's always held on usually the second Saturday in June, because in theory that's when you're going to get good weather here in central London. Not always the case though. We have had washouts in the past.
We have, and isn't it so so British to be talking about this, but
Yes.
all the pomp and the pageantry of today, if you can't be British today, then when can you be, quite frankly? Yes, no, it's an absolutely beautiful day for the King, and hundreds of people have gathered here today. People will be tuning in from around the world just to get a glimpse of the royals today to celebrate the King.
And of course, the Coldstream Guards celebrating the 375th anniversary this year, oldest continuous regiment in the British Army. We're just seeing some of these soldiers marching down the Mall from Wellington Barracks on your screens at the moment towards Horse Guards Parade. So pretty special for them as well.
Very, very much so. I mean, this is the highest honour, really, for them to have this moment. And as with all of the royals, whenever they have an event, it always links back to the military, and it has done for many, many years. We know that the military has a very special place in the royal family, as they have actually served within it themselves.
And of course, the household division, these soldiers aren't just here for ceremonial occasions like Trooping the Colour or big state events. They are serving soldiers. I think the Coldstream Guards recently have been to Iraq, they've been to Uganda, various other places around the world on operational deployment. And I think we need to remember, of course, that the King is head of the armed forces here in the United Kingdom, has a huge relationship with the British Armed Forces.
And deep, deep respect, and a relationship which has gone on for many, many years, and of course, you know, has learnt very much from the late Queen, when she also had that special relationship with the forces. And that obviously comes down to the Wales's family today, who will be here at some point. I was speaking to the crowd earlier, and they were really looking forward to seeing the Waleses. So yeah, it's a very special day for everybody.
It certainly is. And the King, of course, I think I'm right in saying he is the most experienced person completely at Horse Guards Parade today. You were saying he was very young when he attended his first Trooping the Colour.
He was 3 years old.
Gosh.
Would you believe? He was 3 years old if you look at him now. But of course, he had a very different role when he was 3 years old than he would have done today. But of course, we'll see George as well today, and he'll be stepping into the King's shoes at some point in the distant future. But all of this is very much marking in a ceremonial way, the pomp and pageantry attached to it. But as you said, it actually isn't the King's birthday today. It's in November.
And we're just seeing the Royal Standard flying above Buckingham Palace. This is kind of the state Royal Standard, the size of a tennis court. So that's how large this flag you're seeing on your screens now is, and only brought out for very special state occasions, Pandora.
Very much so. This represents the royal family being at Buckingham Palace. Actually, before we just went live, we did see a couple of cars coming in, didn't we, Cam?
Yes, we certainly did. Couldn't quite see from our position who was in those cars, but of course we are expecting most senior members of the royal family to be here. Of course, King Charles is head of the armed forces. We have the Prince of Wales as Colonel of the Welsh Guards, Princess of Wales, Colonel of the Irish Guards. Who else? Prince Edward, Colonel of the Scots Guards. I'm testing my knowledge now. Princess Anne, Colonel of Blues and Royals. We've got them all.
And Princess Anne is always to be expected. She is, in my opinion, very much up there as the hardest working royal. She'll be there. If any royal will be there, it will definitely be Princess Anne.
Absolutely. Well, Pandora, thank you for now. You will be joining us throughout the programme this morning. Of course, we are expecting the King and members of the royal family to depart Buckingham Palace within the next half an hour or so, making their way to Horse Guards Parade for that special Trooping the Colour.
Cameron, and thank you, Pandora. Still to come, we'll bring you full and uninterrupted coverage of the spectacular Trooping the Colour parade, with all the unmissable action next.
This is Trooping the Colour, live on GB News.
This is our country, and we think it's amazing. From high tea to the high street, we love it all. Even the rain, we like that too. There's nowhere else we'd rather be. That's why we're here to be the fearless champion of Britain, its voices and its values. Because we are GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News. We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good morning and welcome back to our special coverage of Trooping the Colour with me, Miriam Cates, and Charlie Peters here on GB News.
All morning, we'll be joined by GB News' royal correspondent Cameron Walker, alongside Daily Express royal reporter and broadcaster Pandora
Maybe then one
Forsyth.
of me and Cam.
And with us throughout the morning to give us the expert track on all the elements of the parade is our panel. We've got constitutional expert and former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and former royal butler Grant Harold. Welcome to you both.
Great to be here.
And you, Michael, we were talking in the break about the history of this amazing pageantry. Where does the term trooping come from?
Well, I mean, Miriam, the whole thing about flags, of course, is that, as we know, they have been used to signify to troops where they need to be and who they need to be with, really since biblical times. But the trooping the colour, as we know it, the first record of that is around 1755. For ceremonial purposes. And it only actually started properly as an annual event to celebrate the birthday of the sovereign in 1805. So relatively recently, you could argue, compared with biblical times. But since 1805, it's happened pretty much every year. And there have been occasions throughout history. It's almost always, of course, been in London. But you see... in 2020, the first occasion since 1895 that it took place in Windsor, and I think now we see senior members of the household leaving, coming into the palace. What I think the history of this is so significant because as far as the sovereign's birthday parade is concerned, it's been on Saturdays so that the general public can take part and can recognise it only since 1959. Before that, it was very much a parade for the military, by the military. And there was a recognition that it was of great interest to the public and needed to be on a Saturday when people could watch and take part. Only in the late 1950s. You were hearing Cameron saying earlier that the King, then Prince Charles, first took part in 1951 when he was 3 years of age. He was in a carriage with the late Queen Mother and Princess Margaret, his aunt. And he first rode in the parade in 1975, so 50 years ago this year. when he was Colonel of the Welsh Guards, fitting, of course, as Prince of Wales. So the King's connection is a very long one.
And, Michael, we've got a number of colour sergeants and sergeants who will be taking position as colour points to guide troops to their correct positions on Horse Guards Parade, even with that infamous military precision that comes with the Household Division. They are so pristine in battle as they are in the ceremonial elements. They'll still need that guidance from their senior NCOs.
That's right, Charlie, and I see you as a guardsman myself, actually. I think you could easily play the part, maybe next year. But the colour sergeants really have to actually be there because they are marker points. It's almost like marker points where the soldiers can position themselves in such a way that they know they're going to be in the right place at the right time. So what they effectively are sort of little flag bearers, marker points, that they play an important part in the functioning of the parade in good order and military discipline. The history of Horse Guards itself is a fascinating one because it's a very important public space in London. Many people would argue it's the most important public space, the most historic public space in London. We're going to see the Guardsman Parade today. It was used for jousting in the time of King Henry VIII. So your viewers can picture, no doubt, a rather portly King Henry VIII watching the jousting 500 plus years ago. And we know also from records that that same space was used for a birthday party for Queen Elizabeth I.
Interesting.
So it's got a very long historic use by the military. And of course, it's next to St James's Park, where in the 1530s, hunting for deer, it was a royal hunting ground. And His Majesty's arriving now by car.
There he is.
Here we have footage of King Charles arriving at Buckingham Palace, the royal standard atop the vehicle. You can see the guardsmen there saluting as his escort arrives through the gates.
Charlie, you see the colour of the car there is a claret colour. That's been a traditional colour for royal vehicles for over 100 years, and later when the royal party come out in their carriages, I think you'll find that the carriages are also that same claret colour.
And of course, Grant, it isn't just the military who are on show today, it's also the royal family. We've already talked about the senior adult members of the royal family, but will the children be involved today? I know our viewers like to look out and see what they're
Absolutely, the children. I'm sure we're all going to be wanting to kind of see the young children there. Obviously, when it comes to the actual balcony, historically we've got the children there. I think everyone will be looking to see what little Louis gets up to on this occasion, because I've noticed that over the years there have been different things that have happened. But even his father, Prince William, I mean, when he was 5 years old or something, I remember on the balcony, I think his cousin, Prince Zara, went to give him a little kiss or something, and he was horrified at this. So there's always been kind of fun with the royal children, but they very much get involved. And as Michael mentioned, the King has been involved with Trooping the Colour since he was 3 years old, so they get them involved from a very young age, just to understand what it's all about and what one day the roles will become.
And also, I imagine, to get them used to it. I think most parents watching those children sit still for a number of hours, and everything they do and say is public. That would fill many parents with horror, but they've obviously been well trained.
It obviously is really difficult, because how do you, from such a young age, how do you kind of say to them, you can't do this? I'm sure there's a bit of bribery somehow involved to kind of get them to be on their behaviour, because obviously they're unaware, but of course the world's watching these events and watching them, and anything they do, any kind of little funny thing they do, it's going to be in the front pages, because it's funny, it's humorous, and it's quite nice. It is nice that they get the royal children involved.
And Michael, we're seeing there Buckingham Palace resplendent in the sunshine. We are so blessed to have sunshine on this day. We're now back to Horse Guards Parade. We've seen so many elements of the Household Division already, haven't we? And well, of course, the Coldstream Guards, that longest continuously serving regiment of the British Army, is the centrepiece this year, with No. 7 Company having their colour in the presence of His Majesty the King. All elements of that most famous division will be playing their part today.
That's right, Charlie, and you talk about the weather, and it is very nice weather for spectators, but I have to tell you, the Guardsmen usually prefer it to be a little bit cooler, and the tunics are really thick, the bearskins are pretty tight, and the heat that they generate means that it can be quite uncomfortable. So it's very nice weather for all of us, but Guardsmen don't mind if it's a bit wet and a little bit cooler.
And Michael, how can you differentiate between the various Guardsmen on parade here?
Well, a very good question, and one of the ways that you can do that is by the spacing of their buttons. Now, at the moment, we're seeing the back of them, and they're just playing the national anthem now, but you can tell the spacing of the buttons when well, you can see them. The Grenadier Guards have evenly spaced buttons. The Coldstream Guards have buttons in 2s, the Scots Guards have buttons in 3s, and then you've got the Irish Guards in 4s and the Welsh Guards in 5s, because they were formed in the Welsh Guards in 1915, the Irish Guards in 1900 by Queen Victoria. So that's one of the key ways. And the King, I think, will be wearing the tunic and uniform of the Coldstream Guards, so you'll see his buttons in 2s. Another way is the colour of the plumes in their bearskins, and the plumes for the Coldstream Guards are a very elegant shade of red, and the Grenadier Guards in white, and the Welsh Guards have a green and white mix. And the Irish Guards have a lovely shade of that sort of turquoise. So they also, of course, have emblems on their collars. So you can determine in that way too. So the origin of the colours in the bearskins is because, and where they are on the left or the right of the bearskins, is because when they would form up for battle, it depended on whether the regiment was on the left of the line or the right of the line, and of course that's where the positioning of the colour on the bearskin was. The Scots Guard have no colour in their bearskins because they used to be in the middle, and therefore it didn't really matter.
Of course, in 2025, these uniforms are for ceremonial purposes only, and many people around the world will actually recognise that uniform as a symbol of Great Britain. But these are serving soldiers.
Oh, they are.
They don't dress like this every day.
They don't.
What's
really.
their day job?
And they'll be pretty pleased that they don't, because these are also take a lot of preparation, of course, to get these uniforms ready and to get polished. It can take. You'll see the cavalry later. Their boots, jack boots, can take 20 hours to polish. So they're very high maintenance. But you're absolutely right. These are every person we'll see on parade, they are all active operational military personnel, and many of them will have the medals to prove it.
And Grant, that dual role that these soldiers have, obviously number 7 company is the rotating public duty ceremonial role, which is a permanent presence at Wellington Barracks, maybe just half a kilometre up from where we are now on Horse Guards Parade. But at the same time, it is that dual role that is so central to service in the Household Division.
It is, because they've got a very active role. And if I can also say, that, I remember on occasions when they're on duty, for example, in Scotland, you'll get them involved in events that the King has as well, that the late Queen used to have. So they get involved in the kind of private aspects as well as the kind of public side. So from my point of view, we got to know a lot of them, which was really nice. And as Michael mentioned, the boot polishing was something that I remember being told about and found that fascinating. From a butler's point of view, obviously cleaning shoes.
And Michael, we've mentioned that today the colours that will be trooped are the number 7 company Coldstream Guards, but it's different every year, isn't it? How is it chosen? Which company gets their colours?
Well, they go in rotation, Miriam, and the colours are very, very important to the soldiers. They have an emotional connection to those military personnel because they see woven in the threads, and often there's gold and silver thread, wire threading in those colours, the fallen comrades of the battles of history. And in the case of the Coldstream Guards, this is a regiment that won 13 Victoria Crosses so far, and one George Cross. This is an opportunity to proudly show off the honours of and glories of the past. Their motto, the Coldstream Guards, nulli secundus, second to none. And there's a little bit of rivalry between the Grenadiers and the friendly rivalry between the Grenadiers and the Coldstreams as to who should be first and who should be second. But that's sort of a historical issue. But they don't consider themselves, and nor should anyone else consider them to be, second place, because frankly, the honour and privilege of their service really rings out through history.
Now, Grant, as we've said, some of the senior royals will be riding on horseback today,
Yes.
but for the second year running, the King won't be. He'll be in a carriage. What's the significance of these open-top carriages that we're going to see today?
Well, obviously, members of the Royal House have always used the carriages over the decades. What's interesting is the King, obviously, this is his second time of actually being in the carriage, which is what his mother, the late Queen, also. We got to know her for being in the open carriages as well. And interestingly, she, I believe, from the age of 60, 61 was when she started riding in the carriage. I think it was around about 1987, 86, 87. The King, obviously, this is a recent thing, but you've got to remember he's significantly older than when his mother was. And he's very accomplished, he's very confident on a horse. I think it's just with his health issues in recent years, obviously they're just playing it cautious.
Of course, and well, we'll very much look forward to seeing those historic carriages as we progress down the Mall.
Well, let's move away now. Let's go and join GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who is at Buckingham Palace for us this morning. He's alongside the Daily Express royal reporter and broadcaster Pandora Forsyth. Cameron, we're seeing those soldiers starting to form up on Horse Guards Parade. We've seen the bands marching down the Mall. What is the vision that you're capturing from outside Buckingham Palace?
Well, it's certainly one of anticipation, Charlie. The crowd's 5, 6, 7 deep all the way down the Mall from what I can see so far. Of course, the sun is shining and they're all waiting in anticipation for the first members of the royal family to depart Buckingham Palace and make their way down the Mall. Then, of course, we're going to have the royal procession led by the Household Division Brigade Major Lieutenant Colonel Charles Foynet, who we've interviewed several times, actually, on GB News. And he is certainly somebody who is in charge of making sure that every button is polished within an inch of its life and every boot is polished in order to impress His Majesty the King on his official birthday. And that Sovereign's escort, found by troops of the Household Cavalry Mounted Regiment and the Household Cavalry Mounted Band, will protect His Majesty in that royal procession. As you guys have just mentioned there in the studio in Paddington, the King is expected to be riding in a carriage this year rather than on horseback for the second year running. Of course, the King is still undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer treatment. We have spotted photographs of the Princess of Wales with her 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, as well as Prince William, the Colonel of the Welsh Guards, who is in uniform. Let me bring in Pandora Forsyth, broadcaster and Daily Express royal reporter, for her reaction. Of course, the crowd's been waiting longer than most of us here for their chance to glimpse members of the royal family. And what I can't get my head around is people come here every single year, come rain or shine, waiting for this moment that we're going to be seeing in the next couple of minutes.
And what's so funny, it's not just followers of the royal family that are here. When I was speaking to the crowd earlier, you've got people who don't necessarily follow the royals, but are just here for the spectacle of what we're about to see very, very soon. This is really a standout moment, not just for the royals in their calendar, but also for the public. You don't see this type of thing happen. It only happens once a year, and it really is truly, truly special.
And it probably is the closest, I think, the United Kingdom has to a national day. And what it does too is put kind of the best of the British Army on public display for the world to see, because of course today's all about the ceremonial spectacle of the pomp and pageantry, but of course you've got to remember all of these Coldstream Guards, Irish Guards, Welsh Guards and the rest of the Household Division regiments are all serving soldiers and will be put on active deployment.
Oh, absolutely. And for them, this is a real big honour for them to be I guess, standing in front and showing them to their very best of their ability to the head of the army, the king, and he'll be inspecting them, making sure everything is right and proper for the day. And I suppose for them it's a celebration too, as well as for the king.
And of course we have several members of the royal family who have particular affiliations with a number of the Household Division regiments. Prince of Wales, of course, Colonel of the Welsh Guards, Princess of Wales, Colonel of the Irish Guards, and the rest of them as well. So they do have a personal link with quite a senior member of the royal family.
Always, always. And because they've not been making as many as appearances this year, over the past couple of years, the Princess of Wales and the King, you will have noted, if you do follow the royal family, that the engagements that they go to are always mostly linking to the military. And they have relationships with the military personnel's families, and they're always bringing and shining a light on their lives.
And we are just seeing the first carriage on the left-hand side of your screens, for those of you watching on television, of members of the royal family just coming through now, riding through the centre archway of the east wing of Buckingham Palace. That's a very famous facade of that palace, and I can now tell you, because we can see that particular carriage, that it is the number 1 barouche carriage, carrying, I believe, the Duchess Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, and the national anthem being played as they depart. There we are, the Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence and the Duchess of Edinburgh there in that first carriage. The second carriage contained the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, of course, 2 working members of the royal family who served not only the late Queen but continue to serve King Charles III well after retirement age. And the camera just panning there, and you can see a glimpse of the Duchess of Edinburgh and Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence just disappearing off the right of your screens, and the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester making their way round the Victoria Memorial as I speak. They're just passing our position now and will be making their way down the Mall. Members of the crowd waving Union flags. And unfortunately, Pandora, they are about to be greeted by a very noisy but very small number of anti-monarchy protests, I'm afraid to say.
Yes, we do see these protests happen, and of course they've got freedom of speech and they are well allowed and within their right to do this, and I think it's actually fair and balanced that we do say this, but they are very much outnumbered, I'm afraid, by people who are supporters of the royal family today.
Yes, and you may be able to hear 1 or 2 of the shouts via the microphone, but as you say, Pandora, a vast majority of them are very much royal supporters here on the Mall and around the Queen Victoria Memorial as well. Just behind us you can see the start, I believe, of that royal procession as the King is getting ready to depart in the next couple of minutes from Buckingham Palace, of course escorted by the royal colonels, Prince William as Colonel of the Welsh Guards, Princess Anne, Colonel of the Blues and Royals, and Prince Edward as well.
And their relationship is closer than ever, obviously father and son, but in most recent years their bond has become a lot closer. I'm sure on the lead up today they've been talking about what to expect from the day, and of course they're now quite used to this. Happens every year. For us it's a real treat, but yeah, they'll very much be in talks with one another, and they'll want this day to go as smoothly as possible for them both.
Absolutely, and just on your screens now you are seeing the Blues and Royals riding out of Buckingham Palace around the Queen Victoria Memorial and starting to make their way down the Mall towards Horse Guards Parade. You know who they are because of course they are wearing blue tunics and they have red plumes coming out of those helmets. Fun fact, those helmets were designed by Prince Albert, the consort to Queen Victoria all those years ago.
Well, let's hope they can stay on their head right now because it's getting rather windy down here. Well, I'm sure they will. And actually they've lucked out with the weather in a lot of senses because it's not too hot today, and we do know that those military outfits are very heavy and can get very hot in the heat.
Yes, and let's just talk about actually what the Coldstream Guards are going to be wearing. Red tunics and black, very hot, very thick, real bearskin caps, pelts coming from Canada, which of course can get very cold in the winter. Not ideal in the summer months.
Not ideal in the summer months whatsoever, but the show must go on. Very British, pomp and pageantry defined right there, and the show will go on. And actually, you know, there has been a lot of commentary surrounding these bearskin caps in the last couple of years, and Camilla has actually said, you know, she is not going to get any new animal fur within the royal family, but these are going to stand as they are, and it is expected and it is traditional.
And we are just seeing on your screens, for those of you watching on television, another carriage departing from the state entrance of Buckingham Palace, making its way through the quadrangle and into the centre archway here. I cannot see quite yet who's in it. I believe it is the King and Queen. It is His Majesty the King and Queen Camilla exiting Buckingham Palace there. I can tell you that Her Majesty Queen Camilla is wearing a silk crepe dress with silver embroidery by Anna Valentine, a favourite designer of hers, and a hat by Philip Tracy. Her Majesty is wearing a Grenadier Guards brooch because, of course, the Queen is Royal Colonel of the Grenadier Guards.
And of course, these positions are all relatively new in the last couple of years. We've seen lots of shifts within the royal family for the positions that they hold within the military camp.
We certainly do, indeed, and of course it is the King and Queen. But you can just see, there you go, you just saw a quick shot of the Princess of Wales and her three children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. The King, of course, being accompanied by the Royal Colonels, the Prince of Wales, the Princess Royal and the Duke of Edinburgh. The Prince of Wales is riding his own horse called Derby. The Princess Royal riding a horse called Noble. You can just see a shot there of the Princess of Wales, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis. The Princess of Wales is wearing a dress coat by Catherine Walker, kind of turquoisey coat colour, would you say, Pandora?
I'd say a turquoisey, yes, that's quite correct, Cameron.
And a hat by Juliette Botterill, and of course the Irish Guards regimental brooch, as she is Colonel of the Irish Guards, and Her late Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II's personal earrings, so pretty poignant for her to wear her grandmother-in-law's earrings.
The fact that they have released this information, there's always the link to the late Queen, Her Majesty here, and that is obviously at the forefront of their minds and everything that they do, and the King very much has been stepping within her shoes and has had the right training for many years for this moment.
Absolutely, and you can hear cheers from the crowds who have been waiting patiently on the Mall. Just a shot there of Prince George and Prince Louis there waving to the crowd down the Mall, as well as the Princess of Wales and Princess Charlotte as well. The King, of course, Colonel-in-Chief of the Household Division. He is wearing the uniform of the regiment trooping their colour this year, which, as we've been saying, is the Coldstream Guards. But just take a moment to think about Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, still very young, being exposed to this kind of spectacle.
Yeah, very much so, but aren't they thriving? I mean, they're waving, and of course, they live a very private life, and as they should. But for days like this, well, they've got to go out and celebrate their grandpa's birthday, haven't they? So it's lovely to see them so well and so happy next to their mother, supporting the King, the monarch, their grandfather.
Absolutely. You can just see Princess Anne, you just saw just before we cut away Princess Anne there. This is the Duchess of Edinburgh and Vice Admirals Tim Lawrence arriving at Horse Guards Parade. They will be making their way up to the Major General's office alongside the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester to watch the King's birthday parade unfold at Horse Guards. That Major General's office, of course, once used and once owned by the Duke of Wellington, who of course commanded the British Army and defeated Emperor Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo.
And for people here who have never been to the Mall, and perhaps, you know, if you haven't, then if you're lucky enough to go, then do. But it's really not that much of a long journey, is it, Cam?
No, not at all. We're expecting the members of the royal family. It takes around 10 minutes, we think, in carriages to make your way down from the carriage to Horse Guards Parade. It's around a mile long, the Mall. They stop just short of the full length of the Mall turn right onto, I think it's called Birdcage Walk, and then enter the Mall from that position there. Of course, the King, as I was saying, is Colonel-in-Chief of the Household Division. I can tell you what medals he's wearing if anyone's interested.
Yes, please
Should we go
do.
for it?
Please do. Let's go for it.
So
Let's test that knowledge.
Yes, well, he is wearing the Queen's Service Order New Zealand Medal, Extra Companion, which he earned in 1983. Queen Elizabeth II's Coronation Medal from 1953, where he was very young indeed. I think he was only about 4 or 5 years old at that time. Then we have the Silver Jubilee Medal from 1977, the Golden Jubilee Medal from 2002. I can keep going. Diamond Jubilee Medal from 2012, Platinum Jubilee from 2022. Long Service Conduct Medals, 3 of them, award bars, awarded in 2016. Canadian Forces Decorations, 3 second award bars. The New Zealand's Commemorative Medal, 1990, and New Zealand's Armed Forces Medal. I'm surprised he can stand up, Pandora.
Well, I think they'd take a long time to polish all of those medals, to be quite frank, this morning, Cameron. But of course, that just shows the ever-defining link with the royal family to the military, and of course, he is the head of. So if he can't have that many medals, then who can?
And of course, quite poignant for him as well, because a vast majority of those medals are awarded by his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II.
I'm sure on events like this, I mean, this is just guessing here, but I'm sure anybody who's human, of course they are human, the royal family, there's always that link. I'm sure on today's like today it's more prevalent than ever to think about his late mother, and of course he had the very best training in the world for many years. He's the eldest monarch we've ever had, so on a day like today he's very well trained to get the job done.
So the King and the Queen are just making their way down the Mall. We don't quite have a shot at the moment, but of course accompanying His Majesty in the royal procession is Lieutenant General Sir James Bucknell, who is the Colonel of the Coldstream Guards, the Lieutenant General Sir Edward Smith Osborne, Colonel of the Life Guards. I'm just going to hand over to Pandora to continue reading the list.
The Major General commanding the Household Division, Major General James Bowder, of course, the Chief of Staff, the London District, Colonel Guy Stone, the Aide-de-Camp, Captain Alexander Villiers-Smith, the Silver Stick in Waiting, Brigadier Mark Berry, the Foot Guards Regimental Adjutant of the Coldstream Guards, Colonel Jeremy Bagshaw. And of course, as His Majesty arrives in a few minutes' time, as they make their way down the Mall, the guards will give a royal salute. And at that moment, you'll hear a very special national anthem as that is played. We heard it briefly this morning, didn't we, Cameron, outside Buckingham Palace when he arrived within his car earlier today.
Yes, we did indeed, and of course, the vast majority of the spectacle of the King's birthday parade going to be taking place here at Horse Guards Parade, just here. But you can see with the beautiful sunshine going on.
The beautiful sunshine, indeed, and if you could just see the crowds, they are about 6 deep going down the Mall, and it truly is a spectacle. And I think this very much, for me, who covers the royal family, this is the start of summer once you have Trooping the Colour. And not only is it a very special day for the public, but more prevalent than ever, such a special day for the King. And of course, we're all well aware of the last couple of years within the royal family, and they've really stuck together through quite difficult times. So I'm sure a day like today is more special than ever.
Absolutely. Well, we're just a couple of minutes away from the King arriving at Horse Guards Parade, so we're going to hand back to Charlie and Miriam in Paddington with Sir Michael Ellis.
Thank you, Cameron and Pandora. We can see now the memorial to the Household Division in the background as those troops in their iconic red tunics line Horse Guards Parade, awaiting the arrival of their sovereign for the celebration of his official birthday, but also that opportunity to troop the colour, to continue that ceremony that has run on for hundreds of years, to show off, frankly, their battle honours, their glories, but also to mark their allegiance to their sovereign. Sir Michael.
Well, you're right, of course, Charlie, and that memorial is a very important one. It was actually unveiled in 1926, so the Guards Memorial there, with St James's Park behind it, unveiled 99 years ago this year. There are 4 bronze statues of real soldiers who fought in World War I. The Morris Singer Foundry created those nearly 100 years ago. That foundry still exists in its modern form and made the lamps for the Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee just a couple of years ago. But that Guards Memorial, of course, is a symbol of the duty and service of 100 years of the Guards divisions. In World War II, it was actually damaged by flying shrapnel when a World War II bomb landed nearby. They decided not to repair the chunks that were taken out of it, and anyone who goes past it today will still see some lumps taken out of that memorial. So it's been through its own battles.
And Grant, we've now seen a number of the senior members of the royal family, including charming pictures of the children. You mentioned earlier that the royal family get close working relationships with some of the members of the household division. What does the role of these soldiers look like day to day, away from the ceremonial events?
Well, as Michael said, they've got the military duties where obviously they're not dressed as we see them today. But what's interesting is, from my point of view, working in the royal household, we got to know them on a personal basis, because obviously they're there to protect and look after the royal estates, the royal homes, but they also get to know the royal children as well. And in fact, one of the unusual experiences I had was I used to go out and exercise the Queen's ponies up in Scotland, and some of those officers would come and join us. We'd all go out together. They were very good on the horses. I wasn't so good, I should say. But it was always good fun. And the same with the royal children. They'd go out with the royal children. So they build up a close relationship, which I think is important, because obviously the monarchy and the armed forces have got a close relationship, and it begins, as I'm sure Michael would mention, it begins from a very young age.
And Grant, you're speaking there about the royals in attendance. We saw earlier that the Duchess of Edinburgh riding in a carriage alongside Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Lawrence, while Prince Edward is on horseback. But it's not a full house, because missing from this year's parade are the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh's 2 children, Lady Louise and the Earl of Wessex, we presume due to their ongoing studies. So
absolutely,
not all children are present this year.
They're not all present, and also it's quite interesting, because if you think about Trooping the Colour in years gone by, there was other members, other royal cousins, Prince and Princess Michael of Kent, Duke and Duchess of Kent. Obviously they're not there this year, and I'm kind of wondering, is this part of the scale back, as the King talked about a scale back royal family, where it's becoming the balcony appearances are definitely less than they used to be, which is quite interesting. So this is very much, I think, the kind of future of the British monarchy now.
Michael, the size of the royal family, certainly the working royal family, has indeed been slimmed down an enormous amount over the last few years. Do you think it's getting to the point now where actually there are too few to carry out the number of royal duties?
Well, Miriam, you make a good point, and of course so many of the active members of the royal family now are also of a certain age, and so that's a factor as well. But I'd like to mention there's some less famous people on parade, but they're famous, if you like, with their comrades, and those are the 4 troopers that led His Majesty's carriage in this royal procession. His Majesty the King is arriving now on the parade. Those 4 troopers won a cup. They won the Richmond Cup in order to get on parade and have the honour of escorting the King. And there's a particular trooper called Trooper Corallini, who's riding a horse called Trinidad. He's 25 years of age, and he was the sort of the best on parade. Trooper Barnaby is only 19, riding Viceroy. Trooper Rock, he's 24, riding Quincy, and Trooper Jarvis, age 21, riding Incarlo. So they, if you like, won a prize in order to have the honour of escorting His Majesty, together with very senior officers. Those young men are doing a fine job there, escorting the Ascot Landau as the anthem is about to be played.
And Michael, as we see more footage of the King and Queen arriving, His Majesty's uniform still bears the cipher of Queen Elizabeth II, a touching detail reflecting his previous role as her personal aide-de-camp.
Indeed, and that's actually a very moving symbol, and His late Royal Highness the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, used to wear the late kings. And so Prince Philip used to wear King George VI's cipher because he was, if you like, an aide de camp to the late king and didn't change it after that. And so it was very much an honour that he respected throughout his very long public life. The king looking immaculate there, wearing the garter sash, and the uniform, as we've said, is pretty hot, even in cooler weather. But His Majesty, of course, not on horseback. He rode a horse called Noble before, and Noble wasn't terribly well behaved. But I think it wasn't only that. The horses, even the experienced horses, can be temperamental. And I know that one or two of them will have been bribed with some extra strong mints beforehand.
Now, the uniformed royals are all wearing black armbands. You can see the king there on his left arm. He's wearing a black armband, and this is as a mark of respect for the victims of that tragic air disaster this week in India. And we are expecting a minute's silence to remember the victims of that crash. So the male uniformed members of the royal family will be wearing those, not the ladies, though, Grant, as we can see. And how much thought does go into the ladies' outfits? Of course, they have a choice about what they wear. There's not a set uniform that they have to put on.
They do. It's slightly more difficult, I always think, for them. And of course, famously, the late Queen Elizabeth II had Angela Kelly by her side to make sure that she always had the perfect dresses or attire for the occasion. And of course, the Princess of Wales equally will have someday. I know the Queen, Queen Camilla, also has a team who are there to kind of keep her right and to assist her with the designs and what to wear on these different occasions. And as you said, it's not. I think it's safe to say that for the men and from Princess Anne, obviously they've got the uniforms to wear. For the ladies, obviously it's every year we see them wearing something different. Well, normally every year. I think Queen Elizabeth a couple of times was spotted wearing the similar hats and similar dresses.
Well, we're seeing now, Grant, the first pictures have come through from snappers at Horse Guard Parade of the Princess of Wales and her mini-me, Princess Charlotte, very much wearing similar outfits today.
I've noticed that before. I think if you remember, in previous years we've seen the royal children wearing, especially Princess Charlotte wearing something similar to her mother. And even Prince George, again, quite often you see him kind of mirroring his father, which is, again, a very royal thing, where I think a lot of people say to me, isn't it unusual to see the royal children so kind of formally dressed? But that's a tradition. That's just what the royal children do. They kind of almost mirror their parents from a young age. And that's, again, part of learning about the royal way of life, for one day what they will also have to do.
Well, we're seeing the King's carriage moving through the parade square once more. And, of course, he hasn't served in the military in a distinct and specific manner, but he still wears, obviously, the military uniforms in his role as head of the armed forces. But some of the decorative pieces he's wearing do actually reflect some work he's done in the military. They're not just gongs for taking part, as it were. As Colonel-in-Chief of the Parachute Regiment, he has jumped from the air, in the words of Field Marshal Montgomery. He has conquered fear in doing so. Not very many members of the armed forces can sport those wings on the right shoulder, but His Majesty the King will do so today.
That's right, Charlie. He's had some military service in the past. We're talking about uniforms. It's interesting because His Majesty actually has to have 5 of these tunics that we've been talking about. We mentioned about the spacing of the buttons. I'm convinced his tailor, a chap called Malcolm Plews, will have been working very hard on these uniforms, Charlie, because you can't just, of course, change the decorations on the uniform each year, depending on who's trooping their colour, because of the buttons holes won't be in the right place because they're spaced differently. So that's a factor that of the King's clothing that isn't often spoken about. You can see Princess Anne there, the Princess Royal, behind the King's carriage. gold stick in waiting, and she's in the uniform of the Blues and Royals. But I think as you see them passing the memorial and the colours, they signify that by looking in that direction, and the postilions take off their top hats. That's a way of saluting or showing respect. And we see, of course, on parade, thousands of people are around watching. Many of those will be families of the soldiers on parade. Many will be tourists and guests, very much enjoying this historic spectacle, which has been uninterrupted, really, since 1805.
And Michael, you mentioned the King's role as head of the armed forces, which of course is a ceremonial role now, but nevertheless there is a very strong military link between the royal family and the services. Although Charles didn't see active service, I believe he trained as a helicopter pilot in the 70s. Of course, William famously served. Do you think it's a very important tradition to continue? Will Prince George and Louis follow their father?
I think they will. It's a very important tradition, and it's one, of course, that has created a lasting bond for the whole of the royal family. I think this is really one of the most important parts of the year for the royal family, because the bond between their guards and the guards divisions are absolutely significant, both to the royal family but also, of course, to the serving military personnel. And when we see them troop their colour in a few moments, they'll proudly unfurl that colour and position it horizontally as they pass the dais on which His Majesty the King will be taking the salute. And on that flag, on that colour, because it was only consecrated yesterday by a military chaplain at Windsor, on that colour will be 44 of the battle honours of the Coldstream Guards.
And Grant, we were speaking just moments ago, Miriam mentioned that Prince William himself was also a member of the armed forces. We spoke about how he elected, actually, to have a frontline military role. He went to Sandhurst. Now, you were the King's butler when he was the Prince of Wales.
Yes.
During that period in 2010, when the now Prince of Wales was looking potentially to be deployed, I think he'll almost have a sense of regret that he has 4 coronation medals, or Jubilee medals as well, on his chest, but he didn't get that operational medal for Iraq.
He didn't, and I remember that obviously that was something he really wanted to do, but I think obviously there was serious threats at the time, and obviously they've got to put his safety and well-being, even though one day he will be obviously Commander-in-Chief, but they have to sometimes take precautions, and I know that was something that he really wasn't happy about at the time. And of course his brother Prince Harry did see active service in Afghanistan, and you know, I'm sure that in Prince William's mind that is something that he probably would have wished that he also got to have that active service.
And of course the presence of Harry in Afghanistan was kept quiet for a long time.
It was. Even we didn't know. I remember at the time, none of us were aware of it at all. So it was a surprise and a shock when we discovered where he had been.
And of course, once it was known, sadly, he had to return because he was no longer.
I remember
he
that,
became a target. We've seen the senior members of the royal family now on a covered platform, preparing for the minute's silence, which of course is as a mark of respect to those who died in that Indian air crash this week.
Yes, the King personally intervening to ensure that this minute's silence upcoming shortly was a key part of this procedure. Let's listen in.
And those affected by the Indian airplane disaster. Would you please stand?
Well, we've seen the King and Queen and the Princess of Wales sit down again now after observing that minute's silence. And it is interesting that a ceremony of this much historical tradition can still be altered in recognition of current events. Michael, has anything like this happened before?
Well, Miriam, it did happen, actually. There was a mark of respect in 2017 after the Grenfell fire. And so there is precedent for it. Obviously, the black armbands are very often worn when there's a death of a member of the royal family, and it becomes part of the officer's military uniform. And you can see senior officers wearing them. And the trooping is now about to begin, and we can see that beginning to take place. And of course, this space, we're right next to Downing Street here, Sir George Downing's Street, which was completed in 1732. They're marching away from Downing Street in this direction, heading towards the Admiralty building. And Admiralty Arch, which you can see there, the Duke of Wellington's office above, where members of the royal family are watching this parade. Wellington's desk is still there, you know, Miriam, and they're very proud of it. And it's a spot where you can really see everything happening. The soldiers will have been rehearsing this now for quite some time. They've had 2 public rehearsals, and they'll have made sure that everything is spick and span for this opportunity. They'll be doing a slow march and then a quick march.
The other thing that remains in that Admiralty building is the maps of Winston Churchill from when he was First Lord of the Admiralty. I remember a meeting in that building when I was a Member of Parliament, being able to actually look at those maps from well over a century ago. So much history in this grant. Just listening in to the music as the soldiers are on full parade.
Well, the massed bands of the Household Division continue to march through Horse Guards Parade as the full ceremonial element of this part of Trooping the Colour gets well underway.
And Michael, how much rehearsal will they have for this event? Obviously, this is not the only event of the year which they perform, but nevertheless, the moves, the timing, the marching simultaneously with the playing is an incredible feat of practice and discipline.
Oh, it really is, Miriam, and later on you'll see them doing a sort of a wheel, which is so complicated that it's not written down anywhere, because no one really can reduce it to writing. So it's passed down by word of mouth from generation to generation, that the famous wheel movement that they'll make later, that your viewers no doubt will see. It's many weeks of rehearsal, privately, and then there are 2, if you like, public rehearsals which take place on this space. The Major General and the Colonels reviews, as they're called nowadays. So they really will have been trained to within an inch of their lives for this. That's not to say that mistakes won't be spotted. Her late Majesty was so adroit at spotting any issues that would take place during the course of the parade that afterwards she would watch it on television, apparently, and if she saw any mistakes, she knew exactly what had happened, and she'd bring them up with the General Officer commanding London District. So they knew exactly, she knew exactly what she was looking for, the late Queen. And I suspect His Majesty will be very similar, having been so many times on this parade ground.
It sounds almost like a manager watching his team back
Well,
and
it is.
picking up a mistake. Does that sound familiar? Did the royal family take this much of an
totally.
interest?
I mean, if you think about it, he's one of the most, if not the most experienced person on that parade ground just now. And he notices everything, as Michael mentioned, even like his late mother, every detail, every single thing they notice. Now, I think, and again, Michael can correct me, I think that afterwards when he consults the Major General, obviously he'll raise anything that he noticed that maybe it wasn't spot on. Does that sound familiar?
I think that's right, Grant. Yes, absolutely. And we probably spotted ourselves, but the smallest little movement out of place or something of that sort will be spotted. There's the Guards Memorial there, and of course Commonwealth flags positioned all along the Mall and right down to Birdcage Walk there. What's really important, of course, about this, and we mustn't lose track of that, is the significance, the symbol of the colour that's being trooped. Battalion colours, Miriam, they only really came about in the form that we know them today in around about the year 1700. I think it's fascinating to note, when was the last time, do you think, that a colour was actually taken into battle as opposed to trooped in central London?
I don't know.
It was, I don't think many people would. It was the Transvaal War in 1881.
Gosh.
But of course, before that, these colours were part of the battle, and they would often be damaged in battle. They'd often be shot at or torn. But the last time one was regularly trooped into battle, taken into battle, actually was the Transvaal War in 1881. But now, of course, you've got the Coldstream Guards have 113 battle honours since 1680, and between 1680 and 1991, their most recent one was 1991, with the Persian Gulf. But only 44 can fit on the actual colour itself, so 44 out of 113 are shown. But the brand new colour that they were given yesterday by His Majesty the King is something they're going to treasure now for many years to come.
Grant, it's really interesting to think back over the centuries, and some of these actions and the movements today are purely ceremonial, and yet they have important military reasons for why, as Michael said, the colour was shown before modern communications. This is the only way that troops could recognise their commanding officers. The royal family have become one of our only links, really, with that past.
With the past, yes.
How seriously do they take that role?
Very seriously. The King, when it comes to traditions, protocols, ceremonial events, it's something that he enjoys. He enjoys being part of it, but he takes it very seriously, again, as his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, did as well. And I'm sure that'll be passed on to his son and his grandson, which is why it's great that the young royals get to be involved in it and get to witness this.
Fabulous footage coming in now of all members of the Household Division formed up on parade. Let's listen in.
Just generally, I mean, I should know. Do you reckon, right, this is hopelessly optimistic, do you reckon that there's no prophecy? Now let's
Enjoy listening to the music.
Well, you can see one of the elements of the parade marching forward now, quick march. Is that the tune of the Grenadiers, Sir Michael?
Well, these, of course, are some of the most famous tunes. Many of these tunes have actually been played every year for decades because the soldiers recognise them. And I'm told even the horses on parade recognise them, Charlie. Some of their favourite marches, the soldiers know that the horses actually prick up their ears when they hear a particular tune, especially the faster tunes. And the horses no doubt say to themselves, we're going to get an opportunity to have a bit of a canter here. And so they're tunes that everyone recognises and have historic significance. For these soldiers, of course, this is an opportunity to show their skill. We know that the British Armed Forces are the best in the world when it comes to, well, frankly, so many attributes. But our ceremonial performance, of course, is second to none. Very fitting for the Coldstream Guards, as that is their motto. And they'll be proudly showing the King what they can do here in their bearskins and tunics. But of course, we know that their excellence actually is operationally. The service that they do for their country in theatre is what really counts. And the ceremonial aspect is important, but of course, their military service is what they, in many cases, what they joined up for. Although I say that, Charlie and Miriam, but actually, many soldiers, I'm told, originally joined up because they were watching as children on television the Trooping the Colour ceremony, and they were attracted to join up as young people. So no doubt there'll be some young people watching today here on GB News that will think of joining up in future when they see this. But they're all proudly wearing their medals. Afterwards, when they all leave the parade and the King has left the parade ground, before they open that ground up to the public, some guardsmen inspect the ground just in case anyone's dropped a medal. Because if you've dropped a medal, you're in trouble. And before they let the public back onto the ground, they'll just make sure that no one's dropped a medal off their tunics whilst on parade.
Now, Grant, they look incredibly well practiced. It's amazing watching them march in synchrony and time with the music, but despite the fact they are well practiced, they still need instructions on the day, don't they? There are still commanding officers.
They do, and again, as Michael mentioned, there's obviously a lot of rehearsals that go on, plus the two that have just taken place. So even though they've done this in the past and will do it again in the future, there's a lot of rehearsals that have got to be put into this. Obviously, they've got to get it right because the Commander-in-Chief is watching, but the eyes of the world are watching as well because these events obviously televised around the world, and Britain's become very famous for pomp and circumstance. I mean, it's always been said that we do it better than any other country.
And Grant, I've seen one of our GB News viewers on gbnews.com/yoursay, where you can get in touch with us as we are watching this ceremony with you. Asking how much does this cost and how important is this as part of our defence budget? Because, of course, there's so much discussion right now about military spending. Helpfully, someone has replied saying that it's a tiny, tiny fraction of our, around 50 billion strong defence budget. But these troops, rather like the parachute regiment or the Royal Marines or elements of our special forces, they are, it seems, especially protected from any budget cuts or interference because of this image we're seeing right now, this iconic shot of centuries of service.
Exactly, and I mean, Michael probably knows more when it comes to the actual budgets, but I think from my point of view, and I think a lot of people agree, is how can you put a price on this? It's priceless. And I mean, I'm aware, each year what the monarchy costs, but when you kind of add up the value, I don't see how you can put a price on something like that. I think, if I'm right in saying, the actual value of the monarchy per taxpayer is something like, it's less than £1 for each of us. And when you realise what they bring in through, also through tourism, it doesn't even come anywhere close to what. So it is great value, without any question.
Well, just this morning when I was walking to Victoria Tube Station, there were some very well-dressed, very well-to-do American ladies coming out of a hotel dressed in Union Jacks, obviously on their way to Trooping the Colour. It's a huge export, isn't it? Right?
It's worth its weight in gold, Miriam, and Grant's got it absolutely right there, if I may say so. It's you can't put a price on this sort of thing. Let's put it this way. I think President Trump in the United States is trying to emulate it by having his own sort of birthday parade today, apparently, in the US. And no doubt he had the idea from this sort of thing. This is something we've been doing for hundreds of years. It's the nearest we've probably got in this country to a national day, as I heard Cameron saying earlier. And it's of great significance. There's so many young people on this parade as well. I mean, we just saw there, just a couple of moments ago, the ensign to the colour, who's only 24 years of age, Lieutenant Max Martin, who the King mentioned yesterday in Windsor in a speech. Now, imagine being 24 years of age and having that responsibility to be ensign to the colour and to have the King mention your name in a speech and to be in charge of a group of men. That's the sort of thing that the Army does for young people. Not just the Army, of course, Navy and Air Force too, but military service, and particularly here in the household division, as we see on parade today, people of comparative youth can really have quite a lot of responsibility. And they often talk about how it's the making of them. Yes, of course, soldiers will always say, well, I'm having to do a lot of work here, shining these shoes or polishing the horse furniture, as they call it. But it's an opportunity to show discipline and service for king and country. I should mention too that there were a couple of guardsmen who were sentries for the escort, Guardsman Walton and Guardsman Hochin, and they protected that colour ceremonially, if you like, but I'm sure in real life, if they had occasion to, they would be not hesitant to protect that colour very forcefully indeed. But they got that honour because of the quality of their training and because of the high regard in which their commanders hold them.
Now, we're watching the soldiers slow march across Horse Guards Parade in glorious sunshine. It looks a little bit windy. Grant, a very practical question. In Britain, it often rains. Are there any plans made for terrible weather? What would the royal family particularly do if it was pouring with rain right now?
Well, can I mention last year? Because obviously I was with Cameron on the Mall when we almost got washed away. The biggest difference is the carriages. Obviously, you can't have the open carriages. They've got to be enclosed because obviously you don't want members of the royal family getting wet. And I felt sorry for the colonels because last year they were absolutely drenched. But that's the reality of Britain. You know, you never really know what the weather's going to throw at us, and it's great to see the weather list today. But Michael, you mentioned earlier on to me that in some ways the rain can be a good thing, because when it's too hot, like, you know, you can always have them kind of passing out.
Well, that's right, Grant, and it really is hot under those bearskins. And as I was saying earlier, you're quite right, the tunics are also quite thick material. They're pretty durable, they last a long time. In fact, many of the uniforms, especially with the cavalry, you'll see a bit later, are over 100 years old. Some of the equipment and furniture, they certainly don't waste in the household division. And they're durable, but the cost of that is that they're pretty heavy. And in the heat, you can sometimes find one or two guardsmen finding it a little bit too much, standing still for prolonged periods in direct sunshine. But the vast majority, of course, will be absolutely fine and will afterwards thoroughly enjoy and tell stories about their day.
Michael, you mentioned earlier that the colour, the flag, if you like, will have been consecrated yesterday. So is this a spiritual link, a link with the church?
Do you know it is, actually, Miriam? Strange as it may seem to some, it's almost like a holy item. It's a relic, if you like, that signifies the service duty and the particular courage and honour of that regiment. And the colour from earliest days, it was treated with great respect. It was paraded in front of troops so that they could recognise it in the heat and dust and fog of war. And because it became so honoured as it was trooped and saluted, and then hung up at headquarters in previous centuries, it started to develop an air of mystique, an air of service that represented fallen comrades, and it still does very much have that today. And we know that for the Coldstream Guards, of course, their history is a long one. I mean, George Monk was commissioned by Cromwell way back in 1650.
Well, thank you, Sir Michael. Let's listen in now as the parade continues on Horse Guards Parade. Well, we're enjoying some cake here in the studio, which Miriam Cates has brought in as we continue to watch this immense parade.
I feel that tea and cake is a very important part of British tradition. We don't have tea, but we do have cake.
There we
go. Union Jack, a slightly depleted Union Jack
well,
now.
I'm depleting
I think
it very
everybody
happily.
in the office is looking forward to digging into that later, but we've had first dibs.
I do hope we haven't cut away from an enormously important moment of the parade to show off your excellent baking. But Miriam
Well, it is a
Cates
birthday
worthy.
parade.
Absolutely.
There we go. We're back to the important things.
Thankfully, they were standing still, which surprises us all.
Do you know, it does make me think, though, it is an awful long time for those soldiers to stand still. They're not eating, they're not drinking, they're obviously don't have any convenience breaks. I guess they're trained for this, but what kind of sustenance will they have had this morning, Michael? Will they have had a decent breakfast?
Well, some may have done, but I think the advice generally is probably certainly to drink as little as possible, you know, for obvious reasons, whilst also, of course, making sure that you don't dehydrate, because that's one of the surest ways you could end up falling over. But you know, it's difficult to know how to get it exactly right, but the vast majority of them do, and historically, you know, that's often been the case. This has been going on for so long. They pass down traditions by word of mouth in many cases about how best to perform and how best to look after oneself to perform at their best. And like I said, for the Coldstream Guards, as they date really from 1650, it's one of those things that they are extremely proud of, their history, their long service. They are considered to have been established in 1661. I alluded earlier to a little bit of friendly rivalry with the Grenadier Guards about first and second place, but because the Grenadiers came in 1656, so you'd think they were second, but actually the Grenadier Guards, whose buttons are in singles, they are categorised as in first.
Oh, Michael, can you just
place.
explain what we're viewing now? Because some of the soldiers have split away from other groups.
Yes, they're in front of the Guards Memorial here, which is to the left of the screen, and they're simply performing now different movements. Part of it, actually, Miriam, is just so that they aren't standing stock still for so long, but it's also to show the different movements that they can perform. And that they will have trained for. And of course, they make it look easy, but it isn't easy at all. To keep in an absolutely straight line and to march in a way where they all finish at the same time, this is a great deal of training that you're seeing here. They turn all simultaneously. That's not something that comes easily. And part of it is to show the different movements that they can make. Part of it, of course, is to prepare themselves for the trooping of their colour. And to position themselves so that they can begin marching in front of the dais on which His Majesty the King is taking the salute.
Well, Mark, I'll pick up here because I think Miriam Cates is still digesting some of Union Jack Lemon Sponge, which is really quite delicious, by the way. You're speaking about the precision of these movements, but for many people at home, they'll have seen this parade every year. They'll have appreciated more recent ceremonial moments of great splendour, including the coronation, but they won't necessarily understand just how hard it is to do drill. I mean, out the window of the palace, Grant, you must have constantly seen these movements being executed with precision.
Yes, of course you do, because that's part of royal way of life. Is this is what it's an unusual. It's an unusual place to work, I've got to admit, because most workplaces you don't look out and kind of see the kind of spectacle you get to see at a palace or even at Windsor Castle. But again, as we've said, this is something that's unique about the British royal family and their close relationship with the armed forces. So it's quite commonplace to see this kind of thing, and even changing the guard at Buckingham Palace is one of the most, I think it's one of the most kind of on tourist lists. It's something that everybody wants to do. If I know anybody's coming to the UK, they want to go straight to the palace, they want to see changing the guard. And it's great fun. I mean, I've seen it many times and I still enjoy going and watching it as well.
Michael, a key part of Trooping the Colour is the music, and military music, band music, is incredibly moving as well as fascinating to watch. What role has music played in the military?
Crucial role. And in fact, from its very earliest days, even at the time of Charles II, even in the 1660s, officers used to pay from their own money for musicians to accompany them before massed bands were actually formally established. The music is of great significance. Some of the tunes that we'll hear have been played since 1936 on this parade ground at Trooping the Colour, and they're recognised by many. And as I was saying earlier, horses even recognise the tunes. I think that there's a tune actually that has been composed specifically for today's Trooping the Colour ceremony to honour Vern Stokes, the Garrison Sergeant Major, who is a character, a very well-known warrant officer in the Coldstream Guards, and he's been honoured with the composition of a tune that's being played today during the course of the parade.
And, Michael, they can be quite playful, these bands, can't they? Playing slightly folky songs alongside sort of military marching classics. And just a moment ago,
they can, yeah.
The chestnut horse we saw and the rider were moving off to the tune of The Girl I Left Behind, that English folk song dating back to the Elizabethan era. People often hear military music and they might assume that it all has links to severe colonel, military composer, but often they are bringing back songs that the people knew. Also,
absolutely.
You know, almost like songs that have been passed down through the generations, akin to nursery rhymes in a sense.
Sort of, and you know, some of them were musicals from you know, pre-war popular tunes. So they're not all classical music. Some of them will have been passed down in recent decades, or even in distant decades, that were very popular, almost like hit parade songs of their era. And so there's an eclectic range of music, and some tunes are actually traditional for certain parts of the armed forces and for certain regiments, where they have developed a sort of tradition of that being their tune. So on parade, I think I'm right in saying, and this is Navy rather than Army, that if Rule Britannia is played, you need the permission of the First Sea Lord to actually play it, because it sort of belongs to the Navy.
And these are accomplished musicians. How does the recruitment of military musicians work? Do they actively headhunt young men, young women who are already talented musicians? Do they learn their instrument once they join the force?
Most of them, actually, Miriam, learn it when they've joined up. Some will have prowess in their chosen instrument before training, and in fact there's a notable expertise in a trombonist on parade today who learnt as a child and developed a very great skill. But most of them actually will learn their instrument after they've joined up. Same thing for the horses. You'll see the cavalry later after the foot soldiers have finished, and it surprises people to learn that many of those troopers won't have seen a horse, certainly won't have ridden one before they joined the armed forces.
With a wonderful shot now of those forces with their colours parading slow march past the sovereign.
Well, it's wonderful to hear that music played with perfect military precision. And Michael, earlier you mentioned the role of the horses in carrying the drums.
Yes, indeed, and we'll see those in due course. At the moment, we can see the horses being ridden by the senior officers. But what I think you'll see here, you can see from this angle that as the escort and the guard, each guard pass His Majesty, the music changes to the respective march that's associated with the regiment, and then officers salute by holding their swords out, and the men acknowledge the sovereign by doing a sharp eyes right. And the ensign who's carrying the colour salutes by lowering it in a horizontal position. So this is the way they they recognise the presence of their sovereign as they march past. His Majesty, of course, will salute and acknowledge his guards, and other senior officers around His Majesty will salute on horseback. There's a regimental slow march and there's a regimental quick march, and the ensign, always carrying the colour, remains at the rear right-hand side of the escort.
And Grant, we've seen the royal family on show today, sitting patiently, fulfilling a very formal role. But after Trooping the Colour is over, after they've appeared on the balcony, we've seen the flypast, what's in the rest of their day? Is it back to private life, or are there behind-the-scenes ceremonies that take place?
It's back to private life, but it doesn't mean to say it's the end of the duties, because I remember the King, I can imagine he will probably return to Highgrove this evening. It's his favourite place to kind of escape to. It's somewhere that he can just get away from everything. But it doesn't mean to say that he then just goes back and kind of kicks his shoes off and doesn't do anything else. He will continue his work as monarch. He will continue his correspondence. He'll be having communication with his secretaries. He'll be possibly having audiences over the next couple of days. So what doesn't really stop for him? I think that was the one thing people always find interesting. They say to me, you know, you must get a lot of downtime, and he really doesn't. He works very hard behind the scenes.
And I have to say, it's not just the King who'll be enjoying a period of relaxation, a brief moment of respite this evening. I'm sure plenty of those grenadiers, Coldstreamers and guards from across the household division will be letting their bearskins down, is perhaps the term you might use later. I've been informed
I'm sure
by sources close to the household division. They do make the most of the night after Trooping the Colour.
I'm sure they do, and I can imagine they'll have a celebratory drink at the end of it, which and again, raising a glass to the King without any question.
Yeah, well, they do so much to prepare for this. And we're watching Trooping the Colour now, of course, but there were two prior Trooping the Colours. There was on the 31st of May, we had the Major General's Review, and then on the 7th of this month, we had the Colonel's Review. So there is a significant period of build-up, and as part of that process, Grant, it's not just the drill that needs to be spectacular, but it's also the uniform work, and that is... people really underestimate the amount of time that soldiers of this division spend preparing for that sort of parade.
Without any question, you can see that. But that's what I was saying with the King. He will, because of his years' experience, even if one of them's out of sync or anything's just not right, he will pick up. And his mother was the same. The Queen Elizabeth, the late Queen Elizabeth, was the exact same. They can spot anything, and it's extraordinary when you think how many people there are on parade, and yet they will still spot something if it's not quite right.
Michael, you spoke about how long it takes to polish the boots to that incredible level of shine and the buttons, but how does one maintain a bearskin hat?
Well, do you know they actually use shampoo?
Amazing. Which brand?
They really do. I don't know what brand of shampoo. That I don't know, Miriam. You're testing my knowledge there. But they actually do use sort of, you know, ordinary shampoo that you or I might use. That's the best way, apparently, of keeping it in good nick. The plumes are coloured feathers. In the case of all of them, apart from the grenadiers, where they're not feathers, they're horsehair. The same sort of horsehair that is used to make barristers' and judges' wigs. Later on, when we see the cavalry, they have little plumes on top of their busbies, which have been known to be used as shaving brushes, Miriam, between you and me and our viewers. Yes, the busbies and these bearskins, they do need a bit of maintenance now and again, but many of them are pretty old. They get good value out of their kit.
A wonderful shot of several rows of soldiers marching in perfect time. And the colours are so perfect as well. They contrast with each other. They look amazing in the sunshine. Colour is a very significant thing, isn't it, Grant, in the way that not only the military but the royal family dress. How much thought goes into which colours, for example, the royal family wear?
Absolutely. And again, you remember Queen Elizabeth II was famous for her colourful outfits. again designed with the help of Angela Kelly, and that was purely so that she would stand out in a room. That was as simple as that, so she could notice, she should be noticed, which is again perfect for this kind of occasion because they all, without question, they stand out thanks to these uniforms. Michael, I read somewhere that the tunics they wear go back to the Tudor times. Is that correct?
Yes, it's been lost a bit in history, but the scarlet colour is associated with the crown. It's perhaps why we see post boxes in red and telephone boxes in their day, and the House of Lords in the red benches of the House of Lords as opposed to the green benches of the House of Commons. So that sort of association, of course, in the days before modern dyeing techniques, it was an expensive colour to produce. Colours used to cost different sums as opposed to today where it doesn't really make any difference to what colour you use. That's why purple came to be associated with an imperial or royal colour, because it was extremely expensive to produce because it was made from crushed insects with shells. The red colour used to be quite expensive. Maybe that's part of the reason why that colour came to be associated with the crown. But you see now that colour in display on all the guards, of course, but the Blues and Royals traditionally wear that shade of blue. They're cavalry, and that dates back to the Earl of Oxford and that particular colour that he wore. But I think that colour is very important, and of course the Ministry of Defence have a regulation Pantone, as I'm sure you can imagine. They have a regulation for everything, and that shade of red, and there are inspectors that make sure that all of the material comes through exactly the right shade of red.
Well, we can see now the red plumes of the Coldstream Guards in a quick march past the Sovereign, because each element of the Foot Guards will now be engaging in that quick march in their columns past His Majesty the King. They'll be marching around in slow time, but as they approach, as you can see now, they advance into a quick march. The music will change as each column of each respective regiment passes His Majesty the King, playing the regimental march of each unit. Let's have a listen to that now. As each colour passes the platform there, the senior officers and the colonels will salute, as you're seeing there now, and His Majesty will acknowledge each unit and their colours as they pass his location. Once every guard has passed His Majesty in slow time, they will break again into quick time, which you're seeing now. That shot of the Grenadiers, you can hear the tune of the Grenadier Guards marching in the distance.
Michael, can you explain to us again how the signal is given to change direction? So it's a large space, Horse Guards Parade, but nevertheless there are, well over 1,000 soldiers there. Everything has to be done with great precision.
You're right, Miriam, and it varies. When we see the cavalry in due course, they often get their signals from a trombonist, believe it or not, who will lift his trombone up in a particular way to indicate instructions for the rest of the soldiers there. But they have. This is part of the reason why they've been training for so long. The colour sergeants that Charlie mentioned earlier, they're positioned at strategic points on Horse Guards Parade, so the men know when they need to turn, and their commanding officers give instructions accordingly. Because, of course, over music, they can't always necessarily be heard, although I can assure you the voices are often loud enough and recognised by the men, so they are heard very often by those instructions.
Grant, what will the royal household staff be doing today? We've talked about what the royal family are doing and, of course, the military on display, but behind the scenes, the butlers, the people who are looking after the royal family, what will they be up to?
They'll be having a little bit of downtime. They'll be having a little rest. No, the reality is there's always things going on behind the scenes. They do get some downtime, normally in the afternoon, but at the moment, they'll be preparing for the royal party to arrive back at the palace, because when they get back, there'll be some drinks offered. Obviously, we've got the balcony appearance. Then after that, there'll be a lunch. So the day hasn't, they've still got a busy day. As I said, as the day goes on, probably in the afternoon or the evening, they'll then get some downtime, especially if the king returns back to Highgrove. But it's interesting, the weekends can be just as busy as the weeks for the royal household. It doesn't mean to say because it's the weekend that they all get kind of time off. So it's quite so these kind of days are still busy. Even for myself, when I was at Highgrove, we had to get ready for the return of the then Prince of Wales, so there was always somebody on duty.
It's interesting, actually. Grant's right about the duty continues, and this day is an important diplomatic day as well, by the way. The military attachés of other countries are often present. They'll be watching in the stands, and the Defence Secretary will be present. He'll be watching, but he'll no doubt have VIP guests from the militaries of allied countries. And so this is an opportunity, if you like, for the official part of the state to show what it can do and to impress visiting dignitaries. And this really is impressive to visiting dignitaries. I can really assure you of that. And we alluded earlier to how I think President Trump has been impressed by what he's seen on previous visits. And of course, there are rumours that he'll be visiting again soon. And of course, the Guards will be on display, as they are for all the state visits. The Emperor of Japan was in the UK recently. I think his was the most recent state visit. The Guards always come out for those state visits and do their thing.
Now, Grant, there's some discussion going on our Your Say live comments feed about whether or not Trooping the Colour is something that's ancient and irrelevant and should be abolished. But what's your view of these historic events? Is it important to still maintain a link with the past?
Yes, I mean, it's ancient. Of course it's ancient. It's one of our best-known traditions, but it's a link with the past, and it's really important. These traditions and protocols, I mean, it is important, and for the military, as Michael said, for everyone that's involved today, it's a huge honour to be doing this. And to suddenly say, oh, let's stop doing this, it's taken away part of our identity. The Trooping the Colour is one of the highlights, as I mentioned, of the year, both for the royal family and for the public.
Let's listen in now. I think we've concluded the marching of all the foot guards around. We're now seeing the masked bands move away from the centre of the parade square. So I believe that each regiment of the foot guards has now completed their march past the Sovereign. So the guards will cut form back into the line they were in originally, and they'll halt, as you just heard, with that music stopping. So what we're awaiting now is something extremely special, because it's going to allow the band of the Household Cavalry to come past for the ride past, the next phase of Trooping the Colour. The infantry have done their piece, but now it's time for the mounted elements of the Household Division, the King's Cavalry, to display their own pomp and magnificence in this excellent central London sunshine. Let's see here now as the mass band moves away to await the band of the Household Cavalry.
gifts, actually, from previous sovereigns, 1805 and 1821, and they are actually quite priceless because they are made of solid silver, not silver-plated, solid silver, and they weigh, well, let's put it this way, a very great deal. The drum horses are used to them, of course. They're evenly balanced on either side, but those kettle drums are very much cared for. They're looked after very, very carefully by the guards, by the cavalry, the lifeguards and the Blues and Royals as gifts from previous sovereigns. I understand they cost 1,000 guineas at the time, but that was 200 years ago, so I don't know what inflation would tell us about that, Miriam, but they're certainly looked after. The drum horses are called Major Apollo and Major Juno, and they have the rank of Major when they're on parade. So they'll outrank quite a few of the soldiers on parade. Since 1660, King Charles II indicated that he wanted the horses really all in black, apart from the trumpeters, and I believe that's a tradition that's still followed.
We saw there the band of the household cavalry coming forward to prepare for the ride past. Just checking online because my clarinet teacher as a schoolboy, Alex Groves, he was a part of the household cavalry band nearby in Windsor when I was growing up, and I've just checked and he's now the band corporal major, a warrant officer within there, so he'll be in the centre of that square right now.
Well, that's wonderful. Charlie, these are the King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery under the command of Major Luke Wadman. Their guns are very, very important to them. Their guns are effectively their colours, and they are real guns. They were made just after the Boer War, 1904. They saw real service in World War I. Their uniforms are also very special, of course. Major Wadman is riding a horse, by the way, called Marmaduke Mullygrubs. I believe they call him Basil, though, off-duty. But their uniforms are also quite historic, of course, and their busbies can be used as water troughs for horses. I don't think that's happened for a very long time, Miriam, but as an emergency measure, that can happen. But the harnesses that they use, this is another interesting little anecdote, I think. Their harnesses, pulling the guns, are actually protected, or were protected, by the Official Secrets Act right the way from 1908 until 2005.
We're now seeing the elements of the household cavalry here, the lifeguards and the Blues and Royals marching past. One slightly misbehaving horse from that first small company of riders making their way past His Majesty the King. People forget, though, don't they, Sir Michael, that the first group of mounted soldiers we saw march past, the Royal Horse Artillery, like many of the foot guards, that was a ceremonial element, the King's Troop, but they are part of a fighting unit as well.
That's right.
Horse Artillery, its 7th Regiment is airborne artillery, men and women who jump from the sky alongside field guns to deploy them, sometimes, as they're trained to do, behind enemy lines. It is a real mixture of capabilities that they have
Indeed,
in their arsenal.
And very skillful they are too in their operational service as well as on ceremonial parade. They're a very diverse regiment as well. The Royal Horse Artillery, I think I'm right in saying, is 60% female, and they had a very signal honour immediately after World War II. They weren't called the Royal Horse Artillery, or they weren't called the King's Troop until King George VI visited in about 1947 and gave them that title. And when our late Queen, Elizabeth II, came to the throne in 1952, instead of having their name changed to the Queen's Troop, she ordered it be kept the same, the King's Troop, in honour of her father. And they've kept that name ever since.
Right, the royal family have a very special relationship with horses. The late Queen was well known to be great lover of horse riding, both for ceremonial reasons and privately. Princess Anne, of course, is going to be mounted today.
Yes.
Part of her ceremonial role, but also choice, we assume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she, like her mother, loves horses and spends a lot of time at Gatcombe, which again is near Highgrove, which is where she spends a lot of her time, and I'm sure we'll be returning there this evening as well. But interestingly, the Queen, when she used to ride at Trooping the Colour, some great footage of her when she dismounted. She had her pocket was full of polos to give the horses. So she would always, even the King, they always carry polos with them just in case.
We're seeing now the trot, the sitting trot of basically the quick march of the mounted elements coming past now. They've completed the walk around the parade square, and this takes real skill to have such an organised, uniformed and precise parading sitting trot in the manner it's been delivered now. It's quite exceptional. We can see now the lifeguards coming round and the Blues and Royals as they lead on from the King's Troop. They were leading the divisions because the guns of the Royal Horse Artillery, they take precedence over all other units when they are on parade. You can see them there leading off, to be followed by both the lifeguards and the Blues and Royals, the two elements of the household cavalry. One of units which singer James Blunt served in when he was on operations in the Western Balkans.
Not his most notable achievement, although perhaps his most
I think actually it was. I'd say. I think once you've served in the household cavalry, you can sing a few songs, but nothing will top that.
Michael, talk us through the role of the standard bearer. Flag's very important in this ceremony.
Oh, it's a great honour, Miriam, and whoever's carrying the standard. As we mentioned, Lieutenant Max Martin earlier was the ensign to the colour today. That's a huge honour. You can, if you look through the annals of history, those very young officers very often become very senior commanders later in their careers. They're marked out, if you like, for success. I don't want to put a jinx on anyone, but I'm sure the current ensign to the colour, the significant honour he has received today by being chosen for this particular service is a very good presage for the future.
We're now just hearing the conclusion of the sitting trot. And Michael, we were speaking earlier about how the horses can pick up the tunes. The tune we were just hearing, the music for the sitting trot, is the Keel Row, 18th century Tyneside folk song. And the horses know this tune, and their ears will lift as soon as the first few bars are played, and they'll know at that point, OK, it's time to pick up the pace.
They will.
And with that music gone, you can see them returning to that slower walk as the band of the household cavalry in their quite magnificent golden tunics and those flat caps move away off Horse Guards Parade, having had the centre of the parade square.
And by the way, Charlie, 9-carat gold, those coats. The threads are made literally from 9-carat gold, but they are very they're ancient. You know, many of them have passed down for multiple generations.
We're now closing in on the conclusion of this parade, because this is now the approach of the march off, because after the household cavalry has concluded this march away at the trot, we will then expect to hear the national anthem as His Majesty the King receives the final royal salute, having reviewed all elements of his household division, the infantry of all 5 regiments of the Foot Guards, and then both units of the household cavalry and King's Troop of the Royal Horse Artillery, performing some exceptional drill. I say exceptional, but we see it every year and several times during each year before the pinnacle of the display in Trooping the Colour. It has been a pristine display today.
And Grant, we've just been seeing pictures of the Queen and the Princess of Wales. They're rising to stand now with the King, who's saluting. And here we have the national anthem. Again, the senior members of the royal family standing for that national anthem. And of course, we're still getting used to having a king after several generations, the reign of the previous queen, his mother. And I've spoken to a number of people who still, whenever they sing the national anthem, it feels slightly strange to sing king.
It does, and again, from my point of view, I've actually obviously known him and working for him, and of course it's fantastic to see him doing this role, but you can't help but watch this and still expect to see Queen Elizabeth there. But what's equally nice watching these scenes is seeing the Princess of Wales back there by his side. It's lovely to see, and of course Queen Camilla. It's just nice seeing all three of them there together. But I was just saying, the Princess of Wales looks absolutely radiant. She looks amazing.
And Michael, she has become an absolutely key member of the royal family. One of the most popular members of the royal family. Of course, she wasn't born into it. She's technically what was known as a commoner, but nevertheless, it's very difficult to imagine the royal family now without her at its heart.
She's a great credit, I think, to the royal family, and she is immaculate as ever. And I think, she's chosen extremely well. I always think it's really nice to have a contrasting colour to red on parade if you're one of the royal ladies, and that beautiful shade of turquoise green that she's chosen. But she always is immaculately turned out, and like the military personnel on parade, of course, she's the Royal Colonel of the Irish Guards, and they will get their turn in due course again to troop their colour. And all of the royal family, the senior members of the royal family, are royal colonels to the Guards regiments. But the Princess of Wales, I think, she embodies the service and duty that we have come to expect from the royal family, following the example of the late Queen Elizabeth II and the generations before her.
Well, we're now seeing all elements of the Guards forming their divisions in 6 ranks and closing up at the head of Horse Guards parade, closing up together as the mounted troops have left the parade square. The field officer in brigade waiting has informed His Majesty that his troops are ready for that march off, and this will be quite the sight because His Majesty will be flanked by the Royal Colonels of the Household Division regiments, and he'll move to the head of his guards, his royal bodyguards, for the procession along the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And though this is the end and the march off of Trooping the Colour, it is no less significant than what we've seen in the last couple of hours, because this is their chance now to be led by their sovereign back to his royal household.
And of course, a great chance for the gathered crowds to have another view of the royal family and of the magnificent parade. And we were hearing earlier, Grant, of people who have travelled from all over the world. People have arrived extremely early to set up camp, as it were, to watch this parade. They only see a few minutes, and yet for them it's worth every second.
I was at the palace this morning before I came over here, and I was amazed that the crowds were already gathering. So you've obviously got people, as you've mentioned, have probably even, you know, been there since the early hours just to get the perfect spot. Because I remember last year when I was there, it was quite deep, 6, 7 deep, so it wasn't that easy to kind of get to the front. So I think that's why people obviously, you know, get there early, so they get a good spot, which is great, because if you're right at the front, you're going to see everything. And
the royal family appreciate people's devotion to them. Is it something that's meaningful?
Absolutely. In fact, for all of them, I mean, the royal family have always said, you know, that they're grateful for the fact that we all turn out and we support them. And even the late Queen, oddly enough, you know, when there used to be crowds in the Mall, I was always asked if she would ever kind of have a little look down the Mall just to see what was going on, and she did. There's actually images of her having a little look behind the curtains just to see what was going on.
And there is His Majesty the King taking that final salute from the brigade officer. Another salute there as all parties prepare for the march off.
Majesty's guards are formed up and ready to march off.
And has just informed His Majesty that his troops are ready to march off. It's been acknowledged by King Charles. He has now withdrawn to all of those units who have formed the household division in totality as they prepare to march off with the sovereign at their head.
Michael, we've spoken about the preparation that the household cavalry have put into this, the musicians. But what about the preparation of the king himself? Is this ceremony so natural to him now that he doesn't have to think about his role, or will he be rehearsed the night before as well?
Well, I suspect that His Majesty will be extremely familiar, Miriam, with it, because, as I say, he first rode in the parade exactly 50 years ago in 1975. So he will be very familiar with it, but he is very punctilious about uniform and about making sure everything goes smoothly. He's got an extremely strong work ethic, as we know, and we want to make sure that his guards are at their best and that he and the royal family use this opportunity, as it's always been designed to do, to show their pride in the service of their armed forces. And now they're getting back onto the Ascot Landau, which is a beautiful carriage, which is deliberately designed when it was created in the early 1800s, that type of carriage to be quite low down so that people being driven in it could be seen by members of the public. Other members of the royal family will get into a type of carriage called a barouche, which is simply a carriage that has a sort of cover at the back, and they'll head back the mile down the Mall. And don't forget, of course, there are other guardsmen on parade who are streetliners. We haven't seen much of them because, of course, naturally, they haven't been trooping their colour, but all the regiments and all of the Guards divisions are represented in one way, shape or form today, and many of them are lining the Mall ready for their sovereign to come past, and they'll also salute by holding their firearm in front of them, in front of the body, which is the way of the Guards saluting on parade.
And Grant, we're waiting for the sovereign now to lead off his division on the return to Buckingham Palace. I just have to say, reflecting on that, we do put on a good show.
We do. I mean, this is the thing. We're famous around the world for our pomp and circumstance, and this is a perfect example of what I see we as in the Royal Wheel, what we can achieve or what we can do. And as I said earlier on, this kind of thing is priceless, and it makes you feel very proud to be British, if I can say.
Well, we've got a comment from one of our viewers, Arnie. To those saying Trooping the Colour is irrelevant, this is a British tradition. I hope it continues for many years to come. And Michael, in recent decades, we've seen so many traditions and conventions eroded and discarded as ancient or not necessary anymore. But actually, it's things like this that remind us who we are, what it means to be British. What is there to tie us together if it's not a link to the past?
Miriam, you are spot on. And every country has its traditions. There are equivalents in most countries around the world, and they venerate different aspects of their own histories. This is our way of doing it. And by the way, it isn't just a tradition. It also actually carries a modern purpose. Because what it actually does, if you ask commanding officers and warrant officers, if you ask military sergeants, they will often tell you that training in this way for ceremonial parade duty is extremely good for discipline. Being encouraged to stand for long periods of time has a practical purpose. Whilst in operational duty, especially in camouflage and undercover, and the discipline and the attention to detail that's required has a modern purpose. So it isn't just it's an important tradition, but it actually has a practical operational purpose as well.
And we can see there the Sovereign and the Princess of Wales, the Queen, moving away as they prepare to return to Buckingham Palace. And Michael, you were speaking about the street liners. They will be giving a royal salute as His Majesty passes each position. They have been on parade now for several hours, awaiting this moment for his return. And once His Majesty and the guards have departed the parade square, as we're seeing now, with both Blues and Royals, lifeguards and members of the royal family marching into the distance there. The colour points will also march off, which will now signify the end of the parade. As you can hear some applause there breaking out on the parade square, because thousands are watching at the square itself.
Now, Grant, it's only a short distance back to Buckingham Palace, but nevertheless, a very significant walk along the Mall and up towards the entrance of Buckingham Palace. What is it like for the royal family living in such a famous location?
We've got to remember the King actually still lives at Clarence House, so Buckingham still is the official residence, but obviously spends a lot of time at Clarence House, and the palace is more the office at the moment.
Well, thank you for that, Grant and Michael. Let's rejoin our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who is at Buckingham Palace for us. He has been all morning, and he is alongside the Daily Express royal reporter and broadcaster, Pandora Forsyth. Cameron, I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. A really remarkable display of British military drill.
Well, absolutely, Charlie. Pomp and pageantry in action right there for the King's birthday parade. We have just seen His Majesty the King and Her Majesty the Queen in the State Landau carriage leave Horse Guards Parade. His Majesty is flanked by the Royal Colonels of the Household Division Regiment, so that's the Prince of Wales, the Prince Edward, Duke of Edinburgh, and the Princess Royal, as well as Royal Colonels. As well as that, we have a number of guards as well as they're heading back down the Mall. I'm joined, of course, by the broadcaster and royal reporter, I should say, of the Daily Express. Get my words out, Pandora Forsyth. I mean, incredible display there of military pomp and pageantry. Something, of course, they have rehearsed for a number of weeks to get to this point, to get up to scratch.
Oh yes, I mean, imagine you're having to put on your best show for your boss. That's essentially what they're doing on a worldwide stage today. Let's take it back to basics. That's what's happening. And of course, this is a moment for them to show off the best of what they've been trained to do. This is a moment not only for the royal family but for the military themselves. This is a set date in the calendar every single year, which they lead up to. And of course, they're well aware this is the third time that they've had the King Charles, at the head of the royal family leading this. So it is particularly special today.
Yeah, and a set date in the calendar, but of course a slight change this year because, of course, the awful air crash that happened on Thursday. We saw, didn't we, where the King, Queen and the Princess of Wales were on the dais as the King had inspected the Coldstream Guards. A minute's silence we had, didn't we? And uniformed members of the royal family wearing black armbands. And it was the King's idea to do this.
Yes, it was. And I think the King is well aware of what is happening within the world, and he'll always nod to what is going on. And I think it was right, 241 people lost their lives, and it was only right today that that moment of silence was held. We've had previous moments of silences in the past for different reasons, but today it was that one. And I think it just goes to show how in touch he actually is with the world. He doesn't live under a rock, and he's well aware of the amount of people who will have been affected by this. They released a statement on this as well.
They did, and I think he was taking after his mother somewhat as well, because of course the late Queen, following the Grenfell Tower tragedy where 72 people perished and lost their lives, they of course, the late Queen of course ordered a minute's silence just before her own Queen's birthday parade as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, this obviously is very much reflected within all the royals. It was the King's idea, but I'm sure he would have taken advice of his Queen,
Absolutely.
his wife, and obviously Catherine and the Wales, his family too. They're all very well aware of what's happening in the world, and it's striking that balance, isn't it? And where they can, they will ensure that they do the right thing.
Absolutely. We're just seeing the start of this royal procession here on your screens now. The band of the Household Cavalry making their way back towards us here at Buckingham Palace. Just coming up to the Queen Victoria Memorial. The Blues and Royals are marching down the aisle at the moment. A couple of horses not playing ball, but on the vast majority of them, let's say, are well behaved. As you were saying, Pandora, crowds are cheering.
Crowds are cheering. They're absolutely loving this, and some people have arrived at 3 a.m. to see this moment, so I'm sure they've been waiting quite a while. And it shows such a display of pomp and pageantry. I know we've said that and we say it again and again, but it's a beautiful display of the military here today. And of course, the King will be very proud of heading up the military.
Yeah, the lifeguards we're just seeing on our screens now, with their red tunics and their kind of white plumes on their hats, as we were saying earlier, designed by Prince Albert. But I think for a lot of the crowds here outside Buckingham Palace, and for us, we're quite lucky where we are here at our position because we've got a telly, so we can see exactly what you guys are seeing at home. But for these, they didn't see much of what was going on at Horse Guards. For them, the highlight is really going to be the balcony appearance behind us and seeing which members of the royal family are on it, and of course the flypast.
Absolutely, and you can expect that to be on lots of the front pages tomorrow, is that iconic moment. And what I'm really looking forward to is when you always see the interactions between the royal family on the balcony. Of course, I'm sure there'll be lots of body language experts and all the rest of it, but that's what the people love to see. They're so private, and that's what's so great about the royal families. You don't know a lot about their sort of day-to-day behind closed doors, and that kind of gives you a bit of an indication as to what their personalities are like, and that will be the moment that everyone is waiting for, and why people have gathered from 3 a.m. this morning. They only come out on the balcony for obviously huge occasions, and one of them every year is this.
Absolutely, and for those eagle-eyed viewers among you on the shot previous to the one you're currently seeing of the lifeguards, you may have spotted a small dais that has been erected outside the centre gate of Buckingham Palace, and we do expect the King, when he arrives back here in his carriage, to step upon that dais to receive the royal salute. We will of course bring you many more details of that as and when the King back arrives. There you go, you can see it on your screens now. He will be flanked of course by 3 members, close members of his family, one of his brothers and his sister, and of course his eldest son Prince William, as the royal colonels of not the Irish Guards, the Welsh Guards, Blues and Royals, and the Scots Guards as well, and a number of other military personnel.
And as they come down the mall, as we saw them earlier going down, sort of waving to the crowds, giving them what they want, that small glimpse of that second that they have with them. They'll always make sure they're getting lots of eye contact with the different people of the crowd, because they're so aware that's going to be their one moment with the royals, and they want to make it a good one. So as they come back down now, we'll imagine they'll be waving. The children will be getting involved. They look like they were absolutely thrilled to be out earlier waving, and I'm sure they will be waving on the way back.
And it's the exposure of the Wales children, which I think is quite key here, because of course Prince George, only 11 years old, he is our future king.
Only 7 years away from becoming an adult. I know that doesn't seem like a long time, but that will come round very quickly.
It certainly will, but of course the king's first trooping was when he was 3 years old, you were saying, in 1950?
1951.
1951, okay, almost got that right.
Almost.
But of course you can imagine the time, can't you, in 50 years' time, when perhaps King George the 7th is on the throne, and he's looking back to a time now in 2025 when he was a little kid in a carriage, riding down the Mall and waving to all those people.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, this is, I know it seems bizarre, but they're going to be their day-to-day life, and it's what the king has grown up in, and that's what's so special about the royal family, is that it's very much a reflection of the year that goes by, and that's why the people love the royals so much, is because it gives them continuity. And every single year you always expect this, so you get that constant with the royals, and that's why they're so loved by so many people over the world. There's nothing too unexpected. They like the continuity, and which is why it's so difficult when change does happen within the royal family, why it's felt so worldwide if it's sad news.
And of course we can see the State Royal Standard flying high above Buckingham Palace. It's very windy actually down here, isn't it?
It is. My hair is slightly getting into my face, but you know, it's not about me today. But yeah, as you said, actually earlier, Cam, we were talking about the size of the Standard.
Yeah, absolutely. So apparently it's the same size of the tennis court. Pandora doesn't believe me.
I don't
but that
think
is the working assumption, but it is the same size of a tennis court.
Which is wild.
Yes.
But, you know, perhaps I'm not wearing my glasses. But it is absolutely huge here.
Well, do of course let us know if you know that if it's the size of a tennis court. We would love to hear, of course. I do believe there may well be a brooch that Princess Charlotte is wearing. So we are just trying to find out. I can tell you exactly what it is. Princess Charlotte is wearing a horseshoe brooch, which was gifted to her by Her late Majesty the Queen.
Wow.
Before she passed away in 2022.
And this
so
will
again,
be the first,
a link back.
and this will be the first time she's worn that. I'm going to pick up my voice now because we're hearing those fantastic instruments behind us.
Yes.
And there are 400 people here today who are having being part of the military band.
Yes, and 1,000 soldiers overall, 200 horses. It is quite the world's display of pomp and pageantry, because we can see the military bands just coming past us with the red plumes on their black bearskin hats. I suspect we will see, there we are, His Majesty the King and the Queen are just passing our position. You can see the King and Queen right there in the State Landau carriage on your screens now, followed closely behind, well, flanked I should say, by the royal colonels, Prince William, Prince Edward and Princess Anne, as well as some of the colonels of the other household division regiments.
And I was just thinking, actually, just that moment there, you can see everyone putting their phones up, but as the king, obviously, he's been here for so many years. Over his time, there would have been a time when no one was putting their phones up to try to get that little glimpse of him, and how life has changed so dramatically for him over the years. And now he's only a third year into trooping the colour, but how life has changed so much for him.
It has, and we can hear some crowds cheering, of course, but you're right, because I think a lot of people don't enjoy the moment because they are on their phones, and you can see it on your screens now on the right. So many people have their phones up trying to take a picture of members of the royal family. We can see the Princess of Wales, Prince George, Princess Charlotte with her little horseshoe brooch gifted to her by Queen Elizabeth II and Louis.
It's so sweet. Both Catherine and Charlotte are wearing an aquamarine and a light blue. I'm sure that was planned, sort of look slightly matching. And isn't it so funny as we see the children grow up, how their affinity with the public is just getting stronger and stronger, and people feel like they know the royals despite only seeing them a handful of times a year, especially the small ones, because they've obviously got a private life, and as I said, rightly so. But seeing them grow up, which is why people are so intertwined with the royal family and they care so deeply about them, is because you get to see them from this high up until they're adults.
Absolutely. Pandora, for now, thank you for joining us. Of course, we're going to be bringing you all the very latest from here at Buckingham Palace for the balcony appearance and, of course, that all-important flypast. But for now, I will hand back to Charlie and Miriam in our Paddington studio.
Pandora, thank you so much. And we're delighted to say that we're now joined down the line by the royal historian Alexander Larman. Alexander, it's great to be with you this afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. We were just discussing while Cameron and Pandora were awaiting the arrival of His Majesty the King about the number of royals actually present today for Trooping the Colour and how many may appear on the balcony. This is now a reduced, as it were, working royal team.
Well, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because obviously we're not seeing the Duke of York and we're not seeing Prince Harry, and I don't think we're ever going to see the Duke of York or Prince Harry, because, I mean, what we've seen very clearly over the last few years is that there has been this distinction between the slimmed down working royal family and these people who actually are the fulcrum of what people expect from the monarchy. And then there are those who, for various reputational reasons, have been cast out into darkness. And I think that on a day like today, I mean, obviously there is this sombre side to it, because the wearing of the black armbands as a tribute to Air India is yet another example of how the King understands the need to respond to current affairs and the need to show the royal family are engaged with what's happening today, as well as the pageantry of what's been going on for years. But leaving that aside, I mean, what you see yet again is the fact that the King, who is still undergoing cancer treatment, is so present, and he's obviously, as we speak, he's taking the salute. He's somebody who is obviously front and centre of the day's pageantry. And I think most people find that exceptionally impressive. I think most people would see the fact that he is in control of the royal family. He's in control of what the monarchy are doing, and he is in control of what the day should be. And I think that's something we should...
OK, Alexander, we're seeing now the King has been taking a number of salutes because he is taking post at centre gate of the forecourt. He's there with the field officer in brigade waiting to his left. You see him there taking another salute from foot guards, conducting another march past with their eyes right. He has now been surrounded by the royal colonels, and we're seeing the various divisions of the escort to the colour peeling off and preparing to enter Buckingham Palace. So all remaining guards are now marching past His Majesty. They're giving an eyes right as they do so, and before returning to Wellington Barracks, just by St James's Park, where they will be dismissed.
Now, Alex, in just 20 minutes or so, we will see the members of the royal family appearing on the balcony. We're very much looking forward to the flypast. We were talking earlier about the size of the working royal family and the size of the royal family that now appear on the balcony. It's extraordinarily smaller than it was in previous decades. Do you think this is a deliberate part of the King's attempt to slim down the size of the royal family? And do you think it's gone too far? There are hardly any senior members of the royal family now left appearing at those events.
Well, I think it's a bit of both, isn't it? Because on the one hand, the King always said, just before he became king, there was going to be a stripped-down monarchy. And I think one of the reasons why the schism between him and Prince Harry has been so pronounced is that it was made very clear to Harry, even before the quasi-abdication off to Montecito, there was no real place for him in Charles's conception of the monarchy. So with that in mind, and obviously the fact that Prince Andrew is a reputational liability, you can understand not having those two. But then there is that slight ambiguity, because you take someone like, say, the Princess Royal, who is an enormously popular figure in the monarchy, will be the hardest working single member of the royal family, somebody who's been going to countless events such as this, in fact. And she will obviously have to be seen as a core part of the monarchy. But then you say, well, OK, but how about Prince Edward?
Alexander, I'm so sorry. We are going to have to leave it there because we do need to cross back live to Cameron Walker, who is there on location. Cameron.
Hello, Miriam and Charlie. Yes, you're joining us live from Buckingham Palace alongside me, broadcaster and royal reporter of the Daily Express, Pandora Forsyth, as well. If we can take a shot of the Buckingham Palace balcony, I do believe we already have some members of the royal family on there. Here we are. So to the left, we have the Duchess of Gloucester, followed by the Duke of Gloucester, very dedicated working members of the royal family, of course. In the middle, we have Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, wife of Prince Edward. And then Pandora, we've got the Duke of Kent, who is almost 90 years old, one of the oldest members of the royal family, with his walking cane, of course.
Impressive.
Very impressive.
Very impressive. I mean, you can't say that the royals aren't hardworking at times, getting up there. And also, I'd just like to take a moment, because if you think of a few years back, how the monarchy has changed, the public face of it, and how, obviously, when Charles came in, wanting a more slimmed down approach,
yes,
and how that's very much reflected on the balcony today.
It certainly is, and we've also got Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, the husband of Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, on that balcony as well. Of course, they will be joined shortly by the Princess of Wales and the 3 children, although I suspect they probably won't come out until the flypast, so just before 1 o'clock today. Of course, elsewhere, Pandora is about to get... It's already been quite loud here, hasn't
yes,
it? But it's going to get even louder, because in Green Park, just next to us, we are expecting the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, who you saw down at Horse Guards Parade, to fire a 41-gun salute.
Yes, and this is, of course, tradition for trooping the colour. I'm sure we'll hear that soon, and I'm sure you will hear it at home, the viewers, when it does happen. But as with any big royal event, there is so much tradition and pomp and pageantry behind it. Everything works like clockwork today, and that is very much a reflection of the King and his organisation. He likes things running to time, doesn't he, Cameron?
He certainly does, and in fact you can just see the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery riding past the King, I should say, with their World War I era 7-pounder guns into Green Park. Ahead of them, of course, firing that 41-gun salute. 21 rounds is the standard, all dating back to a time when ships at sea would signal to a harbour that they were docking in, that they were friendly ships, by firing the 7 guns on their ships to show that their guns were then empty and they weren't going to fire at buildings in the harbour. And because it's a royal park, it's an extra 20 guns, which means 41 guns, if my maths is correct, Pandora.
This is why you've got the job, Cam. Everything is so rich in history today, and as the King is going about today, as I said, like clockwork, every minute by minute is being organised. For him, there's a slight change every single year, which I'm sure is very poignant for him, as he's leading into his 3rd year of trooping the colour.
Absolutely, and if you remember a couple of years ago, the King was not stood on a dais in the centre gate. Of course, we mentioned earlier, of course, over the last couple of years, he's been either riding in a carriage or stood on a dais rather than being on horseback, because he still is undergoing a weekly cycle of cancer treatment. But although he is continuing that treatment, Pandora, he still is insistent on doing all these massive ceremonial occasions.
Yes, and he wants to serve his people. He wants everybody to know that he is a hard-working royal, and despite being hit with a tumultuous amount of events which have happened in his personal life, he is carrying on, he's showing face, he is making sure that he is leading the family as well as leading the monarchy and the Commonwealth.
And of course, surrounding the King there, we have on horseback the Prince of Wales and the Princess Royal and the Duke of Edinburgh, continuing to serve the new monarch as they did with Queen Elizabeth II, of course.
Yes, and of course this was, part of their family for so many years, and with the public, the late Queen was so special to them. I mean, we were both covering it at the time, Cameron, a very different occasion to what it is today. But she really did touch every single generation. So when the King had to sort of step into her shoes, he had to put the emotions to the side and think, actually, what would she have liked to have done? And that's what he brings into his day-to-day work. And especially a day like today, he'll be thinking, I'm sure, about his late mother and what she would have done, and making her proud today, I'm sure.
Yes, certainly duty first. We're just seeing the Household Cavalry band march away from His Majesty the King, who is giving them one final royal salute. In the next few moments, we are expecting His Majesty to leave the dais and enter back inside Buckingham Palace to enter the centre room to join the rest of his family on that famous balcony ahead of the balcony appearance and, of course, the RAF flypast. And I believe we have some special information we can give now about the RAF Red Arrows and something which I think is going to please the King. But before that, we'll pause for the national anthem. National anthem there being played for His Majesty the King. He has just re-entered the State Landau carriage and is being ridden back through the centre arch of Buckingham Palace, we believe to the state entrance, to then make his way round to the East Wing ahead of that all-important balcony appearance. And there usually is quite a lot of speculation as to who is going to be on the balcony, Pandora, isn't there?
Always, Cam. That's the fun behind days like today. Everyone's waiting for that moment and to see who's going to get on there. I know over previous years there's been some pretty standout moments with various children involved at times, which have definitely made the headlines. Yes,
for the market.
That's what I mean by showing a bit of the personality behind them, because they're obviously living their private lives. But you really get to see the siblings interact and perhaps maybe some of the cousins. And we've had some absolutely epic moments over the years, it has to be said. But I know the boys particularly enjoy when everything comes over the flypast.
Yes, indeed. Prince George particularly enjoys the RAF flypast. You can see him always enthusiastically pointing out certain planes to his father, the Prince of Wales. But of course, when it was the late Queen on the throne, there was a lot more people on the balcony, weren't there? It wasn't just working members of the royal family, it was the extended family, and that is a noticeable difference, isn't it, with King Charles III?
Noticeable difference, yes, indeed. We saw faces like Princess Eugenie, Princess Beatrice, Andrew, his brother, notably not here today, and various other members, such as Harry and Meghan.
Yes.
Times have changed.
Times have changed. I think it's quite convenient, perhaps, that the King has made the decision that only working members of the royal family are going to be on the balcony, because it doesn't hurt people's feelings, perhaps, does it?
No, and actually I think it's very much reflective now of a completely different society which we live in. And I think actually it was the right thing to do for many different reasons. I mean, today there was a very small crowd of anti-monarchists. Fine. I mean, the king is used to that and doesn't, hide away from it. But we're in a very different time. Not everyone follows the royal family, and I think it's important that that is reflected into their day-to-day. And whether that be a slimmed-down monarchy for a variety of reasons, and showing on a balcony like today when it's public-facing, yes, I think that is absolutely the right thing to do in various different circumstances, which I'm sure we don't have time to go into today.
No, probably not, because we've only got a few minutes to go, I think, until the gun salutes and the flypast and the balcony appearance. Now, on your screens, you'll be able to see that the weather here in central London today is glorious. Absolutely glorious. The crowds have braved the heat to stand for hours for their chance to be at the front of the queue to get a decent view of the famous Buckingham Palace balcony, to catch a glimpse of members of the royal family waving at them. Quite dedication.
Yes, and as the flypast does go over, perhaps they won't be able to see the balcony if they're way at the back, but they will certainly, probably they'll hear the planes before seeing them, and I'm sure all the viewers back at home will see these and hear these too.
They certainly will. And now just behind us, I'm not sure if you can get a shot of it, any of the cameras, but you can see some green little trucks riding past us, which is to clear up, let's say, the horse mess that has been left on the Mall ahead of the public being released onto the Mall to then crowd around Buckingham Palace.
I'd say that was a very royal way of putting it, Cam, the horse mess.
Diplomatic way of putting it, perhaps. Yes.
But as you said, there's over 200 horses here today.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the artillery have done absolutely fantastic job. And I mean, not only do the soldiers and everyone in the military sort of look the part today, but the horses and the artillery have all very much made sure that all of those manes are looking shiny and gorgeous and making sure they look fantastic for the King when they were inspecting them earlier.
Of course, and we have also been told by the Royal Air Force that the RAF Red Arrows, which are going to end this magnificent flypast at 1 o'clock today, which will please King Charles, let's say, is using biofuel to power the magnificent smoke screens of red, white and blue. So perhaps something that King Charles will be particularly pleased about.
I mean, we both know, and anybody that follows the royals, just how important the environment is to King Charles, and it's one of his stand pillar points actually is the environment. So the fact that he is bringing it to the forefront today and ensuring that that is within the flypast really is something special, and I think again shows his reign and his monarchy is different to those of the past and is very much in tune with the public. I think this is a brilliant show of strength from him, and actually is reflecting his personal values, which we could all benefit from, actually thinking about the environment a bit more, and even down to some of the cars now he uses are now electric, and he is very aware of this, and he's making sure on a day like today, when millions of people are viewing around the world, that that is going to be at the forefront of headlines.
Is keeping with tradition, is the pomp, is the pageantry, of course, originally dating back to the Middle Ages, but the modern, well, I say modern, it's 1700s is the first summer King's birthday parade, dating back to George II. But as you were saying, the King and the royal family have quite a clever way of weaving in a bit of modernity into it in order to keep it a little bit relevant. So the biofuel, the only working members of the royal family on the balcony and the rest of it. Why do you think they place such an importance on kind of keeping with the times as much as possible?
Well, they know that the conversation of the royal family has very much been at the forefront of people's minds in the past recent years. Everything that they do, everything that they wear, every gesture. Oh, I don't know if you just heard that, but that was one of the cannons going off. But everything that they do is under a microscope, from every single gesture on the balcony. So they know that they have to be within the times, because there is so much debate about why is there still a royal family, and as with the anti-monarchists here today, I think that was a reflection of that, and I only think it's fair and balanced to say that when we're reporting on this.
And those bangs you can hear as we speak is the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery firing a 41-gun salute in Green Park. At exactly the same time, I can tell you that at His Majesty's Tower and Fortress, the Tower of London, in the City of London, the Royal Artillery Company are firing excuse me, a 62-gun salute, because 21 is standard, 20 for a royal park, but because it's City of London and because it's a royal palace and fortress, it's 62. So that is why it's a lot of bags going on at Tower of London
There
right
is so much planning which goes into a day like today. I mean, obviously we're on the front line of it, so we really do know, but this will have been in the planning for months. Yes, they do it every single year, but every single year there is a change, as we said earlier. There was that change yesterday to reflect the tragedy which happened with that Air India flight, and everything that the royals are doing today will have been gone over with a fine-tooth comb from all the different sections of the events planning to ensure that today runs as smoothly as it possibly can.
And of course you mentioned the India tragedy, and it was very last minute actually yesterday that we were told that the King had requested that all uniformed members of the royal family wore black armbands, and of course the National Minute silent to remember those who lost their lives in that tragic incident on Thursday. And he's kind of taking after his mum a little bit because of what she did did at after the Grenfell Tower tragedy.
Yeah, and actually some of the flags on the royal residences yesterday were at half-mast as well, to reflect the tragedy that happened. And many people will say, oh, well, he had to do that. Well, actually, I'll be honest, yes, it was a tragedy, but he didn't actually have to do this. And as you said, he is very much stepping into his late mother's advice and reflecting what the public are thinking and is at the forefront of their minds, and that unfortunately is the tragedy which happened where 241 people lost their lives.
It certainly is, and that of course reflected during the King's birthday parades. As we speak, the Metropolitan Police have just opened up the Mall and members of the public are being invited to walk onto the famous road leading up to Buckingham Palace. Many of them I can see, hopefully we can get a shot to you very, very shortly, are waving Union flags. There's a number of uniformed cadets here from the Navy, Air Force and Army. I can see lots and lots of children. I think I spotted one or two scouts as well. We're hearing crowds cheering as they're allowed in, but it's very methodical because there are big lines of Metropolitan Police making sure there's not a mad crush towards the gates of Buckingham Palace.
Quite. I mean, there is so much security here. We got here earlier and coming down through the park here. You know, you've got senior members of the royal family here today. You've got a mass crowd as well. Security measures are very much at the forefront of people's minds. Unfortunately, that is the world that we do now live in.
It certainly is, and of course security services and the Metropolitan Police are very used to big events such as this, and we see many people have actually dressed up, Pandora. You can see them just behind your shot here and just behind me, people walking down the Mall, and people are wearing morning suits with top hats as if they're going to Royal Ascot, which is happening next week, of course. We see people wearing, let's say, royal attire, something you perhaps would wear to a wedding, and then of course people in shorts and t-shirts, normal clothing as well, a mixture of tourists and royal fans.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I was talking to a man from Australia earlier who was in the crowd, who just so happened to be in London today, and he is in shorts and a t-shirt. Australian. You're very much locked out on the weather of the 10 days of the year that it's the sun shines in the UK. But you really do have everybody here from all walks of life, different generations, people who follow the royal family that get here at 3 AM, and people who just so happen to be a tourist in London who come to see Buckingham Palace, who just so luck out today that it just so happens to be trooping the colour.
But as you say, you spoke to an Australian, I spoke to a woman from Tennessee a few hours ago. Have a look on the GBNews X channel if you want to look back on that interview with Sylvia. She has seen 20 trooping the colours. She'd camped out the Prince William and Catherine's wedding, and they've been to loads of other royal events as well, and she was dressed in fine royal attire with a beautiful hat as well, so keep a look out on the GBNews social channels for that. You're seeing on the right of your screens a shot of the Buckingham Palace balcony, that famous balcony, the focal point of so many big state occasions, with the beautiful red velvet drapes over the railing, and in the next 2 minutes or so we are expecting working members of the royal family to come out of that centre room, draped, which is decorated with lots of Chinese ornaments, actually, fun fact if you wanted to know, and they will step out onto the balcony and wave to the crowds ahead of that flypast Pandora. So it's going to be quite a moment for those watching.
It will be, and that's a moment that everybody down here will get their camera phones out for. But we're very lucky in the sense we are just here, but we'll be bringing you all of the latest pictures from the balcony as those famous senior family royal members come out, and we'll see those interactions and what are going to make the front pages tomorrow.
How many people do you think are going to be watching Prince Louis on that balcony?
I'm going to say a good 75% are going to be keeping their beady eye on them. I imagine, actually, as we speak, I imagine there'll be a bit of a talking to behind the scenes. Not talking to, but say, right, you're on your best behaviour, everybody. Get out there. You'll only have to be there for a few minutes. No naughtiness, please. If I was in their position, that's what I would be doing. Do I know that's what they're going to be doing? No, I'm just speculating, but I can imagine that's what's going on.
No, you can imagine the Prince and Princess of Wales doing that, actually, can't you? And, of course, Prince George, and we have seen, actually, on occasion, on the balcony and elsewhere, Princess Charlotte actually giving her younger brother a bit of a talking to.
Oh, yes, and we've also seen that in the in the carriages as well. We've seen that not only on the balcony. I do like a woman who, a little girl, growing into a woman, obviously, who knows her own mind. I think that's very good.
I see a contrast, actually, not a contrast, a similarity, I should say, between Prince George and Princess Charlotte and the King and Princess Anne, because of course two siblings who, the King and the Princess Anne, have supported each other for decades and decades and decades. I can see the same thing perhaps happening with George and Charlotte. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. But I think we are now on the border. Oh, I can hear.
Here we go. The
I can
King
hear it.
and the Queen just entering the balcony now. And the members of the royal family on the balcony ahead of this flypast, just getting underway as we speak. We can see the Duke and Duchess of Gloucester, the Duchess of Edinburgh, Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, King and Queen, Prince George, Prince Charlotte, Prince Louis, the Waleses and the Duke of Kent on that famous balcony. And we are hearing over our heads 4 Chinooks in a box formation fly over Buckingham Palace as we speak. I'm hoping we could maybe bring you pictures of the aircraft flying over very slowly over Buckingham Palace. Here we are. So these are the 4 Chinooks you're seeing on your screen in a box formation. On the left we have members of the royal family watching the flypast taking place. I can see Princess Charlotte's perhaps talking to her father, the Prince of Wales. I can hear over my head now a Lancaster bomber from the Second World War, of course, part of the Battle of Britain memorial flight. We saw the Lancaster fly on VE Day just about a month ago, but of course the famous iconic aircraft that everybody, I think, knows about, harking back to a time of proper British patriotism, Pandora, and of course celebrating victory in Europe as well.
Yeah, and of course the little ones will know all the different planes now going past because they've seen it over the past few years on Trooping the Colour, so I'm sure they'll be looking out for their favourite.
They certainly will indeed. Of course, we've got a number of planes left to fly over, of course. We are expecting the next wave coming over. Here we go. So there is 1 Phenom and 2 Texans flying over as we speak. So there are the 2 Texans and the 1 Phenom flying over flying over Buckingham Palace, just to the right of the palace. I'm looking at members of the royal family, the King and the Prince of Wales, just having a bit of a natter as those 3 aircraft fly over. Of course, all of these aircraft kind of congregate in formation over the southeast of England before flying down the Mall, over the City of London and down the Mall and over Buckingham Palace. So it takes quite a lot of choreography, Pandora. It's quite the challenge, perhaps.
Oh, very much so. This is... Oh, we can just hear another one now. You can usually hear them before you see them.
You can. This is the RAF A400 aircraft, if you wanted to know.
That was quite a large one, it has to be said. But as you can see, all the different interactions on the left-hand side with the royals, probably speaking about which one is which with their grandparents and sort of giving them a bit of a, right, this is this, expect this in a minute. And of course, just trying to keep everybody, they're public-facing, got hundreds of people looking at them. So as I said earlier, probably very much being told to be on their best behaviour here. And of course, the King and Queen in the middle, and they do look very happy, it has to be said.
They do, and Prince Louis just stood in front of his father, the Prince of Wales. Here is the RAF Voyager aircraft, decked out in red, white and blue, accompanied by 2 RAF Typhoons. The Voyager, of course, is the aircraft used by His Majesty the King and senior politicians such as the Prime Minister to represent the United Kingdom abroad. So effectively the equivalent of Air Force One, but for the United Kingdom. So of course that's going to have to fly over in this flypast on the King's birthday.
Yes, of course. And it goes without saying, obviously, there have been working members of the royal family who have worked in the military, who have a completely different affinity to some of these aircrafts as well, such as the Prince of Wales.
Absolutely. And of course the Prince of Wales and the King, both helicopter pilots themselves. The Prince of Wales was an RAF Search and Rescue helicopter pilot in Anglesey. We can see another plane just flying over now. That is an RAF P8 aircraft just flying over the palace. Now, I have sat here for many a flypast over the last few years, Pandora. There is a big gap between the aircrafts. Usually they're in quite a quick formation. Of course, it's a bit different this year. We're not entirely sure as to why, but what it does show us is the royal family, of course, overlooking their people, who have all queued up on the Mall to see British pomp and pageantry in action, but also the very best of the British Royal Air Force in action.
Yeah, this is very much celebrating the Air Force today, as well as celebrating the King's birthday too. And there we go, there we see it, and we see 3 more there.
Yes, this is an RAF C-17 aircraft, which perhaps was poignantly quite famous for bringing the late Queen's coffin from Scotland back to London following her death in 2022. It also brought back a number of our fallen service personnel from Afghanistan and Iraq.
And that's exactly what I mean about the royal family having very much a different take with some of these aircrafts, which many people who are here won't actually know that. But that's a brilliant bit of intel there. Thank you, Cameron.
Yes, and two of the and the RAF C-17 aircraft was actually accompanied by 2 F-35 fighter jets, and just flying over our heads now are 4 RAF very noisy Typhoons. So 4 Typhoon aircraft flying over. I remember this time 2 years ago, Prince Louis just waving to members of the crowds there, seemingly a little bit ignoring the planes, but c'est la vie. I remember a few years ago for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee,
yes.
He had his hand in his ears because it was so loud.
He did. And at one point, I think Charlotte might have put a hand over something happened on the balcony. There was another moment, but there's been so many of these classic family moments over the years. Doesn't matter if you're part of the royal family or any family, these moments happen.
And here we are, the grand finale. 9 RAF Red Arrows flying over Buckingham Palace with their red, white and royal blue smoke down the Mall and over Buckingham Palace, the colours of the Union flag, and to King Charles's delight, it is biofuel that has ignited that fuel to create that smoke, Pandora.
It has indeed, and the crowd is cheering and clapping here. What a moment that must have been as well for him with the sustainable fuel, and it actually hasn't affected the colour or anything either, so you still get that magnificent display here.
You wouldn't have known, you certainly wouldn't have known. The royal family members there looking on as members of the crowd catch a glimpse and wave Union flags. The national anthem is being played as the royal family look on at the crowds, some of which have been waiting since 3 o'clock this morning, as we've been saying, Pandora. The King, of course, front and centre as head of the Household Division, Commander-in-Chief, of the Household Division, head of the Armed Forces.
I imagine they still get goosebumps at this moment. There you go, a wave from the royals.
And yes, wave from members of the royal family. Just over my shoulder, there is the Republic protests taking place with the big yellow banners. We have to, of course, mention it because we live in a democracy, and of course they have a right to protest if they so wish. But I would just point out, Pandora, and perhaps you would agree, that they are vastly outnumbered by royal fans.
Vastly. You know what? Fair enough. They've said their opinion. The royals have seen enough, and they're heading back in. But they've been kept, I don't think purposely, but they have been kept away from the front. There is hundreds of people now just outside the gates of Buckingham Palace to enjoy that spectacle.
Absolutely. The crowds got their moments with the royal family on the balcony. The weather has been glorious, so all of the planes that were due to take part in that RAF flypast could, of course, take part, particularly the RAF Lancaster bomber from the Battle of Britain Memorial flight, perhaps particularly poignant for all those veterans who no doubt would have been watching the King's birthday parade. The Coldstream Guards, of course, 175 years old this year, the oldest continuously serving regiment in the British Army, many of which would have been serving during both the First and Second World War. The flag, the state's royal standard, flying high above Buckingham Palace in this glorious sunshine, of course celebrating the King's official birthday, the 3rd time he has done so here in central London. I will now hand back to Miriam and Charlie in Paddington. So from Buckingham Palace, from me and Pandora, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Cameron.
And we'll hand back to you guys. See you later.
Thank you so much, Cameron and Pandora. Welcome back to the GB News HQ, away from the splendour of Buckingham Palace. And we're joined in the studio by guests who have been with us throughout Trooping the Colour. We've got Michael and Grant. And Grant, I'll start with you there, reacting to the presence of those royals on the balcony, seeing the fly past. Slightly larger gathering than perhaps you might have anticipated, actually.
It was, because I was kind of visualising again, we'd have obviously the Edinburghs, the Waleses, the King and Queen, obviously Princess Anne and her husband, but we had the Gloucesters and the Duke of Kent, which was quite interesting to see, because I think they mentioned he's in his 90s now and obviously uses a stick. And so it was interesting to see that they were there, because last year he wasn't there. So I don't know if there was maybe a reason, maybe just reflecting on the past a little bit, because when it was Queen Elizabeth, there was a lot more on the balcony, where obviously it has been reduced significantly.
Michael, we've seen ancient and modern now. Of course, when the Trooping the Colour was first happened, of course, the idea of flight would have been just a fantasy. When did the planes become part of the ceremony?
Well, of course, you know, I mean, it's actually been quite a while now, but you're quite right. I mean, when they had the first trooping that we've got a record of for ceremonial purposes, 1755, I don't think the Red Arrows were an apple in anyone's eyes, but I think it's an opportunity actually to commend the field officer in brigade waiting today he's been in charge. His name's Lieutenant Colonel Storm Green. He was in charge of the parade today, and I would say, you know, they've done a very good job. He was riding a horse called George. George behaved himself as far as we can tell, but I think it was a very good parade, and the Coldstreamers can be very pleased with how they performed today. I know that a lot of their families will have been in the stands, including actually Colonel Storm Green's family. So it's a very important moment. The royals on the balcony, everyone wants to see them, everyone wants to know what everyone's wearing, but actually the ceremony, the respect and honour done to the colour today is about those who've fallen in battle previously, and I think they've done those comrades, done them proud.
I think we all agree with that, don't we, Grant? And in particular, it was reassuring to see immaculate horse behaviour. The equestrians were doing their bit, but also no fainting soldiers. That's always the fear that people have.
I think that's as Michael was saying, that's one of the things it's tricky when we've got good weather. That is the risk that can happen. And again, I think we saw one horse act up a little bit. But I mean, when you think about how many people are involved, the amount of animals that are involved, horses that are involved, I think it went off pretty polished.
And I think the members of the royal family take enormous pride in seeing essentially their bodyguards, their military protectors, the Life Guards, the Blues and Royals, all those regiments or the Foot Guards display for them in that immaculate fashion.
Completely. And also, I know for a fact the King and the royal family got a huge amount of respect for the armed forces. So to be able to kind of be involved in this Troop the Colour today and be able to witness it, I know we were saying that obviously they feel proud being there for the King, but equally you can guarantee the King will be proud of them.
And Michael, we heard Cameron refer to this first net zero flypast, well, not quite net zero, but the use of sustainable aviation fuel in those Red Arrow jets. We know that the King is very keen on protecting the environment. How significant do you think this move is?
Miriam, as long as they keep flying, I think, you know, if they can be, that's fine. Apparently, even the red, white and blue smoke was eco-sustainable. So we're told in the press notes. I think that we also heard in the background, didn't we, the 41-gun salute, Miriam, and that actually is a long tradition that Cameron alluded to. There used to be, way back in the days of the Indian Empire, the Indian Raj, the Maharajas used to vie for how many gun salutes they had. The lowest had a 9-gun salute. The highest was someone called the Nizam of Hyderabad, who had a 21-gun salute. And the Emperor of India, the British King George V, he had a 101-gun salute at the time. But that will have been happening in the royal parks today. We heard that in the background as Cameron was talking. And I think that's another part of the enjoyment of today.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Grant. We've seen that hydro-treated vegetable oil delivering the colourful smoke trails of the red arrows. But the celebrations don't stop here. This is Trooping the Colour on GB News. Stay with us after this break.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is-
You're
the failure is-
deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon and welcome back to our special coverage of Trooping the Colour with me, Miriam Cates, and Charlie Peters here on GB News.
Well, I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by the editor-in-chief of Majesty magazine, Ingrid Seward. Ingrid, thank you so much for joining us after that really special state occasion. What did you make of what we saw this morning and throughout into the afternoon?
Well, I thought it was particularly good today. The commentary by Claire Baldwin was excellent, and I think because she has an understanding of horses, she explained a lot of things that, you know, perhaps the ordinary viewer wouldn't know. So I found it very, very interesting, and the King looked extremely happy, and as if he was really enjoying it. And of course, you know, the Princess of Wales, as always, looked absolutely magnificent. So it was, and it made you feel very proud, actually, to be British. I think it made me feel, I'm sure it made a lot of people feel quite patriotic and proud, and we know that you know, we do this better than anyone else.
And Ingrid, there's so much attention, as always, on the senior royals, on what the Princess of Wales is wearing, but also on the children. And we've learned now to watch out for little looks from Louis. Did you see any of his normal mischievous spark today?
Not a lot until the very end, and when he gave a cheeky wave as they came off the balcony. He was very well behaved today. You know, he is 7 years old now, but you can see that he's got that spark in him, and he can't resist, you know, getting a little bit of attention. Whereas his older brother, Prince George, he takes it all very, very seriously.
And Ingrid, we saw the fly past from the RAF just moments ago. King Charles, undoubtedly very happy about the introduction of this sustainable aviation fuel, the Green King, seeing those smoke plumes being generated by biofuel for the first time.
Yes, I mean, I had no idea about that, and I thought that was very interesting as well. And I'm sure that the King was very, very pleased about that, because it ties in with, you know, all the things he's been trying to promote for many, many years. But the other thing I thought was quite interesting is that they wore black armbands, you know, as a sign of respect for the fatal crash of the Indian airline. And the last time, and the first time I ever remember that happening was in 2017 with the victims of the Grenfell fire, the Grenfell flats. That caught on fire, and that dreadful disaster. The Queen ordered that the family would wear black armbands. So I thought that was very interesting as well. But so with that, there was the fuel. Everything went, and of course the weather was perfect. Not too hot and not too wet.
Well, Ingrid Seward, thank you so much for joining us, Editor-in-Chief of Majesty magazine. Miriam, well,
thank you.
I'm glad our
perhaps
expert commentary hasn't gone to waste, Charlie.
Yes, well, we'll be swatting up on our equestrian knowledge for next year, perhaps.
Absolutely. Well, with us throughout the morning and now into the afternoon, we've got our expert panel who have been providing outstanding commentary all morning. We've got former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis and former Royal Butler Grant Harold. Michael, throughout the morning, you've been explaining to us some of the very historical details of Trooping the Colour. And just give us a quick summary before it's not long left on the programme now, a summary of the kind of history of the parade.
Well, you know, the Coldstream Guards in particular, whose turn it was this year, have done us proud, I think. They've done the King proud and the country proud. They've got a very long history. You know, they've got all of those battle honours we alluded to before, 44 of which are on their new colour presented to them yesterday, in which they proudly trooped today. One of the things that was top secret at the time was the Coates mission, which was a World War II secret mission where they would have taken the royal family out of the country in the event of a Nazi invasion. They didn't have to do that, fortunately, but it's instructive, isn't it, that during World War II it was the Coldstream Guards that were expected to do that. And I think the royal family of the time would have been very reluctant to go, but it tells you something about the Coldstream Guards and their illustrious history and the responsibilities that they've had. I think it went very well for them today. And there were obviously a few stars on parade, and I'm not just talking about the horses. I think all of the guardsmen did very well indeed.
And Grant, we saw obviously the presence of the royal family. We've just been hearing about the stars of the show, but I think people will be pretty happy with what they saw on that Horse Guards parade.
Yeah, without question. I mean, as with most years or every year, I want to say it's gone perfectly. You know, exactly how they would want it to go. And again, as I said, it's something that the King loves. He loves being involved with it. He loves watching it. He's passionate about it. And he is Commander-in-Chief, as are the members of the royal family. They enjoy being part of it. So it's nice to kind of see the family. It's also nice to see them together as a united family. I mean, watching the King and Queen and the Prince of Wales all together on that podium was quite nice. Seeing them, you know, with everything that's been going on, it's nice to see a united royal family again. It really is.
And Michael, you were saying earlier that although this is pageantry, it's ceremonial, it has little in a way to do with the military's day-to-day role. Nevertheless, it acts as recruitment for young people who see this and want to be part of something bigger.
It does. There are lots of people. I mean, the officer commanding the parade today, Storm Green, he wanted to join at the age of 15. So there'll be many watching today that later join.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Grant. That's it from us from Trooping the Colour for 2025. We've enjoyed the presence of our panel, constitutional expert and former Attorney General Sir Michael Ellis, and the former Royal Butler Grant Harold.
Well, also thank you to GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker, who's been doing a sterling job live from Buckingham Palace alongside the Daily Express royal reporter and broadcaster Pandora Forsyth. And, of course, we'll be back next Saturday at 10 o'clock. Next up is Dawn Neeson with The Weekend, but first of all, your weather.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. After quite a lively few days of weather, things will be slowly turning that little bit more settled as we head over the next 48 hours or so. In that meantime, we do still have this area of low pressure around, now stretching its way more towards northern areas of the UK. So there are still a risk of some outbreaks of rain, a few thunderstorms still lingering for the first part of this evening. Quite a damp evening and night to come for areas of Scotland in particular. Elsewhere, though, it will be relatively dry, some clear spells around. A few mist and fog patches are possible, but nothing too dense. And whilst it'll be less muggy than some recent nights, it's certainly not going to be too chilly at all. Many of us will see temperatures around double-digit figures as we start off Sunday morning. Some of that rain will still be lingering across the Northern Isles first thing tomorrow morning, so it's still quite damp and dreary here. And there'll be another band just starting to stretch its way into the Outer Hebrides and other areas of Western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland. But this will be certainly less intense than the rain that we've seen around today, generally more lighter outbreaks. Some sunnier spells developing elsewhere, but we do have a scattering of showers potentially developing across central areas of England first thing on Sunday. And those will slowly push their way more towards southeastern regions as we head throughout the day. So again, the odd sharp shower can't be ruled out. But if you manage to dodge those, there'll still be plenty of sunshine in amongst all of that. And feeling pleasantly warm where you see that sunshine, highs around 24, 25 degrees Celsius in places. And with lighter winds tomorrow as well, that will help it feel most noticeably warmer for some of us. Into the evening, those showers across the southeast will tend to die down. We'll still have those outbreaks of rain still lingering across some northern regions, but generally we're starting to see that trend towards something slightly more settled. I know there's the chance of some further rain in the northwest at times into the start of the new week. Generally it's the sunny spells that will persist for many of us, and temperatures around, if not holding up above average for the time of year. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, this is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. This weekend has certainly gotten off to quite a lively start. Some quite intense thunderstorms have moved their way in from the south, courtesy of this area of low pressure. This is going to continue its journey northwards, and increasing into this afternoon, it's the northern half of the UK that will see the bulk of the thundery activity. Northern Ireland, Northern England and into parts of Scotland. Some torrential downpours of rain, hail, even some strong gusty winds around at times, and warnings are still in force. There'll still be a scattering of showers for parts of Wales, western areas of southern England as well. But an increasing number of sunny spells developing here, and it will be feeling pleasantly warm in that sunshine. Not quite seeing the highs that we saw yesterday, but still around 25, 27 degrees Celsius across parts of southeastern England. The cloud and rain up in the north, though, is going to be holding those temperatures back, so it'll be more around mid, potentially high teens at best across these regions. This area of more persistent rain will also be continuing its journey northwards as we head into this evening, gradually easing off as we do move into the overnight period, but it will still be fairly drab and damp as this slowly pushes its way off. Elsewhere, there'll be an increasing number of clear spells overnight, staying fine and dry. A few mist and fog patches are possible, but anything too dense at all. Less muggy than some recent nights, but certainly not chilly by any means. Most of us will certainly see temperatures holding up comfortably in double-digit figures. As we move into the second half of the weekend, there is another area of rain just pushing its way into the northwest, but this is certainly less intense than the rain we're seeing today. Lighter outbreaks into parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland here. And there'll be a scattering of showers developing across central, southeastern areas of England, but those in between will see a nice slice of sunshine, and once again feeling pleasantly warm in that sunshine, as to 22 to 25 degrees Celsius. And generally, though, that easing trend of the rain will be continuing into next week, an increasing amount of sunshine for all of us, and temperatures still generally not too bad.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good afternoon. It's 1:30 on Saturday, the 14th of June, and it's the weekend live on GB News. Better late than never, I say. Your main stories this hour. The Prime Minister will be told to launch a national inquiry into grooming gangs after a months-long audit by Baroness Casey, being warned that white British girls who were targeted were being institutionally ignored for fear of racism. Starmer's government has previously resisted this inquiry, but is this now a major use